Battery's gonna die. Sorry about that. All right, so we have now resumed open council coming out of our in-camera session. And with regards to the first item that we discussed in camera, I do need a motion as per the direction that we decided to take in camera. Can I get a motion then, Daniel? And what would that motion be, Councillor Rubin? This is on the request for the offer to purchase. You're on mute.
The motion that to reject the offer. Yes.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. And a seconder for that, Councillor Westman, and all opposed to that. All right, and that is carried. Thank you very much. Okay, and then with regards to the second one, Deputy Mayor, did you want to speak to that and make that motion with regards to the direction we?
Well, that was decided in camera to give direction staff to proceed with that direction, right?
Right. So, Ron, did you want to confirm?
If I may, I think the motion can read that the council, that Lucan Biddulph grant the 6-month extension to Florentini Cabrera on the conditions outlined by Deputy Mayor during the in-camera session. I think that gives enough.
So that, yeah, I wasn't sure the wording. Okay.
Thank you.
Make that motion.
Deputy Mayor makes that motion. Can I get a seconder for that one? Councillor Regan? And all opposed? And that is carried. Thank you very much. And we have going into Court of Revision, but I guess we should wait 2 minutes until 6 o'clock, correct?
Yes.
Welcome. We'll get going in a couple minutes. Oh, and Paul's joined us. Okay, so it is 6 o'clock, the time that we've advertised our Court of Revision. So what we do need to do is we have to appoint the Court of Revision, excuse me. So the motion in front of us is resolved that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Lucan Biddulph be appointed to the Court of Revision for the Hodgins Drain 2020, the Casey McCarthy Drain 2020, and the Riddle McCarthy Drain 2020. And that Mayor Kathy Burkhardt-Jesson be appointed as chair for the Hodgins Drain 2020, the Casey McCarthy Drain 2020, and the Riddle McCarthy Drain 2020 Court of Revision. Can I get a mover and seconder for that, please? Councillor Westman and Councillor Regan. All opposed? And that's carried. First one we're going to talk about is the Hodgins Drain. I will turn it over to Mike DeVos from Spreet to walk us through this.
Can you unmute yourself, Mike? Do you know how to do that?
Sorry,
There
Kathy,
we-
you
there
will
we go.
need a motion to open the Hodgins Drain Quarter Revision.
Right. I see that right in front of me and I missed that. Okay, so we need a mover and seconder to open the Court of Revision for the Hodgins Drain 2020, that it be opened. Mover and seconder for that, please. Councillor Regan, the seconder for that. Councillor Mastarakis. And all opposed? And that's carried. Okay, now I'll turn it over to Mike.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay, the quarter revision is an assessed landowner's opportunity to object to the amount of the assessment against that property. And the Drainage Act indicates that they need to supply an appeal 10 days in advance of the quarter revision. It is possible for the court to accept a verbal appeal or an appeal walk-in off the street sort of thing without pre-notification, but that takes a special vote to be able to account for that. To my knowledge, there hasn't been any appeals submitted or questions. Maybe staff has information I don't have, but to my knowledge, there has been none.
Yes, so I'll just jump in there and just to confirm, there has been no communication to staff about this drain. So there has been none.
Okay. Okay, so with that in mind, the motion that we would entertain would be resolved that the assessment of Hodgins Drain 2020 be confirmed as presented in the engineer's report dated March 27th, 2020, and that the Court of Revision for the Hodgins Drain 2020 be closed. So if there's not any discussion on that, can I get a mover and seconder for that? Mr. Mastarakis and the Deputy Mayor Manders. All opposed? And that one's carried. So now I need a motion that would be resolved that the Court of Revision for the Casey McCarthy 2020 be opened. And a mover and seconder for this one. Councillor Regan, Councillor Mastarakis. All opposed? And that's carried. So just like the Hodgins Drain, Mike?
Yes, this is a similar situation. I have not received any questions or have any knowledge of an appeal for this drain either, unless staff has received something that I'm not.
And from staff, we have not received any written or verbal communications on this drain.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any comments from the court? And with that, we'll have the same sort of motion to pass, which would be resolved that the assessments for the Casey McCarthy Drain 2020 be confirmed as presented in the engineer's report dated March 18th, 2020, and that the Court of Revision for the Casey McCarthy Drain 2020 be closed. So a mover and seconder for that, please. Councillor Westman and Deputy Mayor Manders. All opposed? And that's carried. And then resolved that the Court of Revision for the Riddle McCarthy 2020 be opened. The mover and seconder for that, please. Councillor Westman and seconded by Councillor Regan. All opposed? And that's carried. Okay, Mike.
Yes, similar to the other ones, I have no knowledge of any appeal that's been submitted.
And from staff, we have no written or verbal communications on this drain.
Okay, thank you very much. Any comments from the court? Seeing none, then the motion will be resolved that the assessments for the Riddle McCarthy Drain 2020 be confirmed as presented in the engineer's report dated March 2020, and that the Court of Review be closed. Mover and seconder for that, please. Alex and Daniel. All opposed? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming, Dave, or Mike.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Mike.
Yep. Okay. Good night.
I don't know whether council saw the note, but Blue Water Recycling, we're going to put off until a meeting in the future, whether or not it is August or into September. There is some legislation that's coming down, and probably Francis feels that that would be a better time to him to speak to it and what the changes would mean to the municipality. So we'll reschedule Francis. Christine is up next. Is she here yet? Okay, if we can let her in. And I'm going to welcome Christine Scrimgeour, our auditor. It's great to see you. I'm not used to seeing you in a virtual setting. I think of all the times I've popped in over the years, and you and your team have been here. And certainly I know that I've missed that. And I know it's been a different way of working, but we're glad that you're here with us tonight. And I don't know, Catherine, if you've got anything you want to say first, or whether I'll just turn it right over to Christine to walk us through her report that she's presenting.
No, I don't have anything to say right now. So Christine, go ahead.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'll go through my report like I normally do. Please don't hesitate to ask me questions. And if I'm not explaining something properly, I'm happy to do that. Nice to see all of you as well. This has been a very strange year, as everyone is aware. And I just want to first off start with saying thank you to Catherine and her staff. It has, as you can imagine, auditing in COVID is not an easy process, and she has made it extremely easy to get things we need, and has been very responsive to any questions that we have. So I just want to say thank you to Catherine. This was her first full year of audit, so it was a learning experience for her as well, but your books are in good hands. Anyway. All right, we'll go through it page by page, and hopefully I'll answer your questions as I do this. On my page 1 is your independent auditor's report. So this says that the financial statements are materially correct, that I don't have any reservations or qualifications with regards to my audit opinion. They are dated as of tonight's date, which is hopefully the date that those charged with governance under Canadian auditing standards, being council, we'll approve them, and then we can finalize them. We will then start working our way through the FIR and get it submitted to the province as well. The reality for the township is $120,000. That doesn't mean that I only look at items over $120,000. In fact, every transaction that flows through the municipality's books is eligible for our statistically sampling, and we did do that testing and did not find anything in internal control weaknesses. All right, the next statement is your consolidated statement of financial position. So when this says consolidated, I'll remind council that we do remove 49% of the fire board, and which is owned by South Perth. So that's just the one fire board. The rest is all of your records. So we do remove that 49%, just so council is aware. So the balance sheet looks a little different this year than last year, and a couple of reasons for that. One is we continue to increase our reserves, which then translates to a higher cash balance. We also, the land held for resale, as council is aware, we did sell a fair number of those acres during 2019. We had only sold one parcel at the end of 2018. So as well, once we had the final costs on that phase 1, We also set up the land that the township has retained. So that's the land around the Public Works building as part of your land because it's held for use in the township's business. And then accounts receivable at the end of 2018, we still had a fair bit of couple reasons. They were holding back an HST rebate from 2018 that they eventually did pay the entire amount. As well, we still had some Hockeyville accounts receivables at the end of 2018. So that's the decrease really there. But overall, an increase in financial assets of about $800,000. We then come down to our liabilities. And so the bank loan that was there at the end of 2018 to help fund the new daycare was converted in 2019 into long-term debt. Accounts payable and accrued liabilities, the decrease really there is a couple reasons. One is we had a lot owing back to the county and school boards for the supplementary taxes at the end of 2018. As well, there were holdbacks on the daycare as well. So that's the decrease there. Obligatory reserve fund. So the majority of that is in your DCs, and we continue to, as the township grows and has new development, we continue to receive development charges. And we didn't have a lot of projects in 2019 that qualified for those DCs. We will use those up as we go forward as those projects as identified in your bylaw occur. And then that long-term liabilities, as I mentioned, we did debenture that or take out a loan on the 910. We actually, our loan was only over 600,000. So we were able to pay 300 back and then took out that new debt. So that net financial assets is always the line I look at. That would be the balance that you would have in the bank at the end of the day if all your receivables were in your bank and all your payables had been paid. And as you can see, you've had a significant increase, about 1.6 million, and the majority of that has been transferred over to reserve. So that's a good news story. The other item I always look at is the non-financial assets. So ensuring that you're replacing capital assets at least equal to what your amortization is each year, and your total tangible capital assets plus capital work in progress is approximately the same amount from year to year. So you are replacing those assets at that value. Coming down to accumulated surplus at the end of the year, 43,530,000. Any questions on that at all?
I actually have one. Just before I ask, does council have any on that? I don't know whether I heard you correctly. I thought you just said the capital work in progress is usually the same.
Sorry, it plus the tangible capital assets. So that's really your total that you spent on capital. Okay. So if you add the two lines together.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
I understand now. Okay. Okay, yep.
All right. I'll move on to the next statement, which is your consolidated statement of operations and accumulated surplus. So this is the budget 2019 versus the actual from last year. I'll remind council when we get to the expenditures that we don't budget for amortization. So that is a non-budgeted item, and your amortization is about 1.9 million. So in fact, we were underspent if you take that out of the actual. The revenues, the increase there, really the other revenue is where the land sales are held. So that's that 390,000 versus 15,000. We don't budget for the land sales because at the time we're doing our budget, we have no idea what land sales we'll have. And so we don't budget for those. So that's really the major increase there. We did have some increase in water and wastewater, but those transfer over to their own surpluses. So they don't affect your general surplus. And then under expenditures, I really don't have a lot to say in this. The planning and development costs is where the cost of that land held for resale. So what it cost us to for the acreages that we sold and put into our capital. And I'll remind council that there is a loss on those sales with an eye to eventual recouping that through taxation dollars in the future. So that's why it's obviously the costs are higher than the revenue. But even with all of that in there, you'll see that excessive revenue over expenditures line. So about 3/4 of the way down the page, 623,000 at the end of 2018, 816,392 at the end of 19. And again, that's basically where you're covering your operating costs with your operating revenues. Everything below that line relates to capital and our one-time grants, etc. And so really not an operational type revenue or expense. So that line, I'm always looking for it to at least stay stable or increase. And in fact, you've increased by a couple $100,000 there. As I mentioned, those numbers under the where it says other. So those are grants, developer contributions, DCs that we recognize, federal gas tax that we recognize, things like that that are related to capital and therefore are not considered operational. The large amount in 2018, I'll remind council, was the city grant for the year. So that's why it's gone down so much. Any questions on that at all?
Don't seem to see any.
Okay. I won't spend a lot of time on the next couple of statements because I have highlighted the things that the larger numbers on these statements. I will go into the notes of the financial statements, and I think the one that council would be most interested in, let's go through a couple of them. Note number 6, the deferred revenue. So this is where you can see that the DCs have gone up about 400,000. So that's savings towards future capital, really. Projects, as I said, that have been identified within that study. The next note is on your long-term liability. So this is your debt. And as I mentioned, there was new debt in 2019. And then the note that I think you're most interested in is note number 8, which is a breakdown of that accumulated surplus. As you can see, about 3/4 of your accumulated surplus is reinvested in tangible capital assets, therefore cannot be liquidized. So that's really not available to spend, but the remaining amount, so your reserves have gone up about $1.1 million, and add it with the reserve funds, you're almost up to about $1.2 million total increase in those. And that's basically equal to what we saw on the balance sheet of the increase there. So that's where I mentioned that you'll see it in the reserve fund increase.
Christine,
Yes,
while you're on the accumulated surplus,
yes.
do we know, or do you know, how the reserved one for administration, that is an incredible jump. How did that happen?
So that's your efficiency grant. So we moved it over to the reserve. So we spent a little bit of it, not much, in 2019, according to what had been approved by council, and the remainder sits there until we decide what we're doing with the remainder of it.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Continuing on, note number 11 are just the commitments that you have both to the OPP and then your share of the Lake Huron primary water system. We don't consolidate that into your financial statements because your ownership percentage is a small percentage of the total system. And we have noted new note 16. So this is just basically saying COVID is going to have some implications for the municipality, and the total amount at this point is unknown, and that you have followed provincial orders with regards to closing certain services.
Okay. Ron?
Just a quick question that just actually, I don't know why it never occurred to me before, but how do we, Christine, a question to you through the mayor, how do we account for the, I guess our portion of ownership in the Blue Water Recycling group? Because we are, it's almost run like a co-op, similar really to the water system. How do we account for that in our financial statements?
So you would account for your revenues and expenditures, your share of them as billed and as received.
Okay,
so if it ever came to if it ever stopped like existence, we would I don't know where they would end up with the net book value of what the business would be worth, right?
Yeah, that would be a difficult number to arrive at, and Lord knows what it's really worth. And there's obviously liabilities as well as assets. So, I mean,
Yeah.
Deputy Mayor Manders may have a better take on that, but that's always been a kind of a question: what would happen if? And so, I think that'd be a good question to ask when Francis is here at some point in time in the future. So, thank you.
It's a good question. Yeah. At the back of these statements, there's two schedules. The first one is your schedule of tangible capital assets, which basically breaks down your assets by components. And as you can see, and you can imagine, your infrastructure is your largest percentage. Over half of your assets relate to water, wastewater, and roads. And then the last schedule is, as I mentioned, we filed the FIR, and the FIR is filed on what's called a functional basis, so but broken down by these functions. And so this just takes the financial statements and breaks it out in that manner. So this reconciles your external financial statements to what's filed with the ministry. And you can see the various departments and what each one of them costs, and it's just helpful from a planning perspective as well.
Okay. Any questions for Christine on the draft consolidated financial statements? Councillor Mastarakis.
Can I just ask a general question of Christine? How do you see comparatively Lucan Biddulph versus other municipalities on the financial statement? Is that something we can ask today? And then also, where do you see the impacts, or have you seen in other municipalities or are seeing potential impacts with COVID on their financials? If that's something you can comment about.
So on the COVID side, it's a little early still to determine that. Some of the services that you've been forced to close are not always money-making services. So there's some pluses and minuses to that piece. We will, obviously with the building, things that already had footprints were allowed to continue, but any new builds we had to wait. So those monies would be held on hold for you. So it's kind of there's some wins and there's some losses, and I really haven't had, I don't think enough time has passed yet to figure that out, quite frankly. I've worked with some of my bigger municipalities in doing that work, and so for instance, I do the city of Woodstock. We've looked at, they obviously have significant recreation and significant building going on as well. So it's difficult to determine that at this point. As far as where you as a township is, you continue to grow, you continue to be in a very good position. That way, I talk to your CAO. I always talk to the CAOs before I present, just to make sure there's nothing I'm not aware of as far as liabilities, things like that. You continue to grow, you continue to be well managed, and you continue to save, which those are all, I think, good indicators. I see growth, and I see financial stability when I look at your financial statements.
Thank you. Very good.
That's what we like to hear.
Not the right answer.
Well, growth and financial stability, right?
It's hard to manage growth, quite frankly. It's a wonderful thing. As I said to your CAO today, it's a great problem to have, but you also have to manage it well. So.
Any other further discussions or comments for Christine? Do you have anything to add at this point, Catherine? Oh, no. No, I think, I'm really glad to hear the opening comments that you had, Christine, and working with Catherine on, the past year. This is really her first year from what we can consider normal, but then you throw COVID in there. So there's always going to be something that is challenging, but you found a way to work together. And I know glad to hear the positive comments coming from you, but I also know in talking to Catherine, that she certainly appreciates the support and everything that she can get from your team as well. So that's
Great.
a good working relationship. If that's it, if there's nothing from council, we do have a motion. I just wonder, we have to include in the minutes the declaration, right? Your declaration?
You actually, because of the new auditor's report, as long as you approve the audited financial statement, it now has what's called the independent auditor's report right in it. So as a whole statement, that's all you really have to approve now.
Okay, so that's changed. Okay. So with that in mind, I will entertain a motion that resolved that the Council of the Township of Lucan Biddulph accepts the draft consolidated financial statements as presented on July 14th, 2020. And if I could get a mover and seconder for that, please. Councillor Regan and Councillor Masterakis. And all opposed? And that's carried. Thank you very much.
Have a great night, everyone. It's nice to see you. Take care.
Very much. Yeah. Thanks, Christine. Okay. All right, moving on in our agenda. Okay, so now the minutes. We're an hour and 15 in and we're just getting to the minutes, but that's okay. You've got the council minutes from June 16th and our special meeting minutes from June 25th in front of you. And unless there was nothing to be amended, if I could get a motion to accept those minutes. Just a sec. And I think you're going to have to print one off, Tina, tomorrow. Because there's not a motion in there, so just print it off. Can I get a motion to accept those as circulated? Councillor Regan. And a seconder, Councillor Westman. And all opposed. And those are accepted. The business arising from our minutes hasn't changed, and unless there was anything that needed to be added, those are all ongoing, and hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we'll be able to knock a few of those off. If there's anything that needed to be added. Seeing none, we'll move to communications. And there's a number of them there, and staff hasn't pulled any, but I do think it's important to just take note of the letter that we received dated July 8th from Minister Clark, from the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. It's quite an extensive letter, and it outlines a bill that the province is introducing. It's a very wide-ranging bill, and it kind of touches on a number of items. I think the one that is probably the first one that would affect us is the fact that they will now be allowing, should the bill go through all the stages and be passed, us to continue to meet virtually if we so choose, outside of a COVID emergency. And we will certainly look for information to come to us as they work through that. I think the one thing that we have to keep in mind is, and Ron and Tina can back me up on this, is that if that is something that council wants to continue to do, to have the option to do, our procedural bylaw would have to be updated, and we would only be able to do that essentially in the emergency situation if we were still meeting, wanting to meet virtually. So I think we'll just watch staff as they come through with that sort of information, but that's just one thing to keep in mind. I don't know whether there was anything else in that letter that needed to be highlighted. As I say, that bill that they've introduced is quite wide ranging, and it will have a number of different effects, or there'll be a number of different things that will come down and affect municipalities. And I know that they are providing webinars on certain aspects of it for staff. So staff will be learning about certain changes coming forward. So is there any other items from the communications list that council wanted to pull to discuss or had questions on? Okay, seeing none, then we will move forward with our committee reports. CEDC, I don't think there's anything from CEDC at this point.
Just that I think everyone realized we had Kara, Finn, and Dirk Vander present at our last EDC meeting about the development of a CIP. So that was the focus of the meeting.
And we'll discuss that in your report later on. Okay, Blue Water, Dave.
We meet Thursday.
Okay. Nothing from Lake Huron. Fire boards, and we are happy to be joined by our chief, Ron Brower, and the chair of our Lucan Fire Department, Dave Goddard. And as per request, with regards to fire protection with around mid-rise residential buildings. I don't know if maybe I'll hand it over to the chair, if there's any, to Dave Goddard, if there's anything that you wanted to highlight in the report that you presented to us, and then I'd open it up for council for any questions for the chair or the chief. Oh, you're muted, Dave.
How about that?
No, good.
Okay, thank you. Everyone's been over the report, I'm sure. And so, you know, in summary, the fire department has always kept in step with development and the requirements of the community, and will do so going forward. So we don't have any concerns whatsoever. I think that whatever you folks decide in terms of development around the community through the fire board, we'll follow suit and prepare to protect that development. So at this point, I'd just as soon entertain questions and see where you may have concerns, if there are any concerns left now at this point.
Okay, that's fair. Thank you very much, Dave. Any questions from council with this report? I'm just having to go down to see. Dave, Peter, Daniel.
I have a question, Kathy.
Okay, yep, sorry, I can't get.
Yeah, I know Ron's got the report up there, but.
Yep, go ahead, Dave.
No, I just wanted to, I had talked to Dave and Ron, and, you know, my big question they answered was, you know, anything that's currently in front of us in any development, was there any concern of initial expense or you know, problem, again, protecting those buildings, and that we would need to be aware of in the budget next year or at any time. And, you know, they answered that question, that obviously their equipment they have right now, they're satisfied with on anything in front of us. So that satisfied my answer. So,
okay,
or my question. Yep.
Thanks. Any other comments for Peter, Councillor Mastarakis?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us tonight. And you guys were great in helping us with a pool house fire we had at our house. Good thing there was water close by, and great work by all. Some of the questions I was getting from the community, from firefighters that were I think not volunteer based or emergency personnel were around. They talked about anecdotally about certain requirements or specifications when it came to mid-rise buildings, that there was a rule around, I'm not sure if every organization is different, needing to have within 10 minutes, 18 firefighters at the scene. There's an NFPA 1710s that they talked about, and for volunteers, an NFPA 1720 for volunteer firefighters. So I was looking to see how we, and from the questions I'm being asked, how we're meeting those standards when it comes to these mid-rise builds.
Well,
If that's the standards you're basing your work on and guidelines.
One of the guidelines that we've always had was come through from the fire marshal was the 10 and 10. They wanted 10 firemen there in 10 minutes. That's what the rural departments were all gained for. And we're meeting that at this present time. And it'd be something like, if we had any high-rise buildings or that, we'd have a second station already toned out for it, and we do that automatically. So we'd have lots of people on the way. The fire marshal has kind of went away from the 10 and 10 and concentrated a lot more now on early detection and things like that instead of the 10 and 10. And they've kind of, I wouldn't say backed up on suppression, but they're promoting that a lot more. But still the standard to us is 10 and 10. And then we grow from there, and we are meeting that at this time. I think it was 10 and 10 and 90% of the calls.
to follow up to that, Councillor Mastarakis?
Yeah, so part of it was the 10 minutes side. Part of it was, I guess, around the ability to evacuate if you've got a stick structure versus concrete structure. I guess the difference is that, and around the stick side, even with the building codes, there can be, I guess, anecdotally, if somebody puts a hole in the wall, or they've had people pass out in a doorway that allows the fire to spread. There's having people on site quickly. And if, I think it was the EMS person, if we're getting South Huron to come in the middle of winter, or one of the questions was if 3:30 on a Wednesday afternoon, we have a call and it's a volunteer firefighters, and then you have a motor vehicle collision right after, what are we able to support that as well?
Every building that's put up right now, they all have a fire plan that's issued, like the Lions building, the Woods building, everything like that has a fire plan that's approved, it's inspected. And that accounts for the evacuation. They have to prove their evacuation, that it's a monitored alarm system. And really the evacuation is the responsibility of the owner and the tenants. It's not a responsibility of the fire department. We assist them in any way possible, but really through the theory of everything that's put in place, they should be out of the building if they're adhering to the fire plan when we get there. And most of the buildings now, like a lot of them have a 2-hour burn rate and stuff for a room. They're basically built more like a cell. So if there was a fire, it's contained to one unit. Most of them are we'd fire that or fight it from an internal fight on a building like that. As far as more than one call, anytime that there's 2 departments are toned out, and dispatch will call the fire coordinator, and they will make adjustments to the rest of the departments to cover areas for us. We've had it once where Elsa Craig had, I think, 4 stations, and then we covered their area. They give me a call. I make sure we've got guys here, and then like a station like Bryanston, Middlesex Center would move departments around. And I think at that call, they put Bryanston's pumper in Ilderton, and then we were manned while that is going on. So that's how we cover our area. And so that's what we would do. Like if we were at a call and then we had a car accident, there'd be another station automatically would be ready to take over from us.
One last question. There was another question about demographics of the buildings. So we get 114 units. If the target market was 55 and older, if that's the case, people retiring from their farms, wanted a place to live in Lucan to stay close to family. and then 5 years from now they're 60, 10 years from now they're 65. They're on the, you know, the fifth and sixth floor evacuation. Does that change anything in your mind?
No, a lot of buildings now, like the Prince George and even the Woods, right by the township office there, if the alarm goes off, what happens is there's doors in the hallway and everything that are magnetically held open. They all release and all those doors close. And because of the time limit now with the code, most of the spots are over an hour. So what a lot of them people would shelter in place because we have time to look after a fire, like if it's room and contents. We basically, that buys us time to put that fire out. But a lot of places now, it's shelter in place is what would happen. And like the Prince George actually has that. A lot of areas, if there's a fire, they'll shelter in place.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. Those are my questions. Thank you for attending. I appreciate it.
Just a response, if I may. You mentioned the one alarm 2 weeks ago, and when we looked at the records for that alarm, we had 14 people in 8 minutes arrive at that scene. So, you know, we're satisfied that we're delivering the level of service in appropriate times, and we have enough people. And to boot, because it came in as a structure fire, the Granton Fire Department was also on their way. So there were bodies, more than enough bodies heading for that alarm. And so that would be the case in a larger alarm as well.
Any other questions for our guests at this time on that report? Okay, well, thanks very much, gentlemen, for joining us. Appreciate the input. It's certainly given us all something to think about, and it's been great information to share.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on. Alex, ABCA and Upper Thames and/or Upper Thames.
We have an ABCA meeting on Thursday, and it's a summer schedule, so we won't be meeting with Upper Thames until August. So I'll have a report for August, I guess. That's it.
Thank you. Parks and Rec, we have the minutes from the June 29th meeting in front of you. And I believe, I don't know if there's anything that you wanted to highlight, Paul. I know that an item coming out of there is slated for discussion later on in the meeting, but is there anything else that you wanted to highlight?
I think it's just good to highlight the, we reached out to the PRAC to kind of see how everyone's doing and kind of what everyone's expectations are with sports and recreation. I know the phase 3 opening announcement has brought a bunch more questions to the forefront, and luckily it's things that we've already been looking at. I know one thing that came out is that if there's restrictions to viewing hockey, for instance, they were kind of looking at a way that we could provide access to parents. I've reached out to St. Thomas. They actually have this technology right now, and I was providing some pretty good information on that. So I'm looking into that. It's something I'm going to bring forward towards to PRAC, and then I think I'll discuss it as well with the ice users. It's a Hockey TV, I think, is the app, and it's been pretty successful for St. Thomas. So even the grandmothers in Florida can tune in, so they're quite happy with it. So
right on. Very good. Any questions on the minutes that Paul's provided? Okay, seeing none, moving on to staff reports. Do you want to start, Ron, or does Tina want to do her reports first?
So, there we go. Yeah, actually, I've been on holidays for the last 2 weeks, so I'm gonna hand it over immediately to Tina to go through that, and I'm gonna try and share the screen for that that report. Okay.
Okay, so the first report was just some amendments to the procedural bylaw. Council is aware we have made some slight changes to the agenda format beginning earlier in this year, and that prompted further review. Just done some comparison with other municipalities in the county and made some amendments as suggested there I'm not going to read through them all, but they are highlighted in a draft attached. And then if there's no questions or concerns, there is a bylaw included for adoption. So is there any questions regarding that?
Just scrolling through. Councillor Mastarakis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A minor point, in section 6.2, there's of instead of or, and I just noted it here. I don't have the document, that page right in front of me. Just a minor change there.
Okay.
The other question was around minutes. We chatted before. It says in here without note or comment, but we do provide note and comment. So maybe if we do, is that correct? Ron, maybe you can jump in. That should we be looking to change that in the future or leave it as is, whatever works best?
It's yeah. A lot of times we're gonna stray from this from time to time, depending on the issue, and ultimately it's at the call of the chair or the mayor in this case. So it's, you know, this document can be whatever council collectively wants. So you know, we try and leave some leeway into it, but it's at the end of the day, like I said, it's whatever council and council collectively want the document to read. So.
Okay, then that was it. If we do want to amend that, I guess in the future, that's up to council.
I'm wondering that I think eventually, and when I say eventually, probably within the year, we kind of had a brief discussion about this, Tina, yesterday, that there's a good chance that we're going to have to go to a different agenda format. And it would likely, if I'm not mistaken, probably lend itself more to that traditional just note and file.
That's correct, Kathy. The county is currently looking at an agenda program called eScribe. There are 2 other municipalities in the county, one starting to use it and one that has been. And from what I can tell, looking at their minutes, it is more of it's like a database type thing that as motions are made, it's recorded and it pre-populates the minutes for the clerk. So it is definitely a more efficient way of doing the minutes. So if we are leaning towards that program, which we've just kind of been waiting for the county to take the lead on that, to share costs with it, because there is quite a cost incurred with it. But yeah, the minutes would definitely alter towards more motions than comments.
So maybe we just keep that in for now, and then by the end of the year, we would likely have some direction as to how we're going to move forward with this program in one way or the other.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So there's no further questions regarding that report then?
Don't see it.
Okay, and then the next report was another amendment, which has been done a couple of times this year, but we're bringing it back. So an amendment to the fees bylaw to add in the increases approved for the sewer and water rates. So those were deferred till June 30th. The new rates would then become effective July 1st. So the fees bylaw is being amended accordingly. As well, we did have a request earlier this year for a site plan amendment, and it was discovered that we don't currently have a fee for that process. It's not something that's come to Luke and Biddulph's attention very often. So that request will go through without a fee, but any future requests, it was suggested to incur a fee on that. And I think for our township, 500 was felt appropriate for that fee. Other than that, there was no other amendments made in it.
Okay.
Was there any questions regarding it?
I don't see any. I don't see any. All right.
I had a question, if I may, Madam Mayor. Sorry.
Hi, Daniel. Yeah.
Sorry. I was just wondering, how did you arrive at the 500?
So our planning department actually gave us a list of fees. So I can tell you there was one municipality that was 600. There was one municipality that was 1,000, but the majority were 500
Okay, so all right.
for that site plan amendment fee.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Tina. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Great. Any questions for Tina? Okay, all right. Thanks for that, Tina. Did you have anything else besides those two reports?
No, just I'll mention that we have scheduled a policy working group meeting for Monday, July 20th. So we'll be working through those and hopefully be able to bring the rest of the HR policies forward soon.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, moving on. No building bylaw. So finance, Catherine.
Yeah, I just have the one report. I did speak to this one verbally at the last meeting to give you the details. This is just the formal report asking for council to approve to withdraw $20,247.87 from what we call the efficiency fund reserve in 2019 for the 2019 projects as shown in this report. And also this was mentioned and already included in the financial statements that Christine presented earlier.
Okay, any questions for Catherine on that? Okay, and I believe the motion is later included in our list of motions, so we can deal with that at the end of the meeting. Thank you very much, Catherine. Anything else?
Not this time, no. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, planning. I believe Dan has joined us, so welcome, Mr. Fitzgerald. And we have two items in front of us, and one of them has to do with the Verhoog application that we had the public meeting with a couple months ago, or excuse me, a couple weeks ago. Feels like a couple months. Dan, I'll hand it over to you.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor, and thanks to all members of council for having me here tonight. Just want to make sure everyone can hear me.
Yep.
Okay. Perfect. So through the mayor to all members of council, as mentioned, my name is Dan Fitzgerald, planner for the township of Lucan-Biddulph. The application before you tonight, as represented here, is a zoning bylaw amendment application that was heard at a public meeting on June 16th, 2020, to amend a site-specific provision for height in the residential third density exception holding zone, R3-8-H, to establish the maximum height of 17.5 meters, whereas 12 meters is currently permitted as the maximum. To recap a bit from the previous presentation, the subject property is a 2.66 acre parcel of land and is situated in the Lucan Estate subdivision, just north of Richmond Street with a frontage off of Old Clover Drive. The existing land uses surrounding the property include single detached dwellings to the north, south, and west, and vacant land to the east. As such, the existing land uses are predominantly residential in nature. The property, again, is currently vacant, a parcel of land, and is within the urban settlement area of Lucan, and is designated residential in the township official plan. At the last meeting, I did provide council with an overview of the project, the guiding policy for the consideration, and a brief overview of public comments that we had received to date. The purpose of the presentation tonight is more to provide council with a brief overview of the analysis provided in the planning report. So, as a point of clarification to council and to the public, the Ministry of Transportation, through consultation, has provided additional comments with regards to the applicant's proposal and the setbacks shown on the initial site plan, concept plan. MTO has provided comments again this afternoon that the site is located in an area regulated by the MTO, and that MTO would consider a reduction to the required setbacks based on MTO policy for 14 meters. Due to the existing building line along the section of Highway 4, MTO will consider a reduced setback for the proposed development. All buildings and structures, including parking and fire lanes, shall be set back beyond the existing building line defined by the adjacent structures on the east of Highway 4. So what this generally means is MTO is requiring the development of these lands to be set back to wherever the existing building line is for the residential homes that front onto Richmond Street. So that's something that will have to be considered moving forward when you're looking at zoning on the property. The planning report identified a number of policies to consider from the provincial policy statement, county official plan, as well as the local official plan. Generally, all documents support the policy and support the policy direction that development be focused within the boundaries of the settlement areas. They also speak to the appropriateness of development based on a mix of densities and encourage appropriate residential intensification based on the proximity to soft and hard services. Based on the location and servicing hierarchy, the use of apartment as permitted in the zone is considered appropriate and is supported by existing policy. As noted in the report, the question is not whether the use is supported, but whether the proposed height and scale of the requested amendment fits within the existing local context. As such, the analysis of the report focused mainly on the township official plan for Lucan residential policies. The report notes that section 2.1.5.1 requires apartments to be low rise and small scale, but does not provide a hard cap on height. Policy 2.1.5.2 states that the scale, density, and form of new residential development shall respect and be sensitive to the small town character of the village. Additionally, the policy further notes that to ensure compatibility with existing development, the density and height of new residential development will be limited. Further, the report reviews policy 2.1.5.5 and seeks to limit medium density development impact on single unit dwellings to ensure existing character by way of zoning bylaw provisions. So when analyzing all three of these policies, planning staff considered the established existing character by way of reviewing existing development approvals and zoning bylaw standards. Staff concluded the provisions and historical approvals for apartment buildings have been limited to height of 10 meters with the exception of 2 site-specific zones that permit 12 meters. Reading all the policies together, planning staff find that the township official plan does require development in the form of apartments to be low-rise, small scale, respecting the established small town character of Lucan, which has been interpreted as a maximum of 12 meters or 3 stories. Notice of the application was circulated to agencies as well as property owners in accordance with the Planning Act requirements. Any submissions received by the township in advance of the June 16th public meeting and at time of writing of this report are included as attachment 10 to the planning report. Generally, the concerns that we did receive are specific to the following themes: tenant occupied units as opposed to owners, the impact of vehicular traffic and noise, loss of privacy, negative impacts to property values, impacts of shadowing in the neighborhood, the impact of existing character of Lucan, a small town versus a London feel, and the potential impact to emergency services, schools, and soft services. Planning staff also note that a number of comments were received in support of the proposal as depicted in the applicant's proposed concept plan submission. Given the above, staff recommend that zoning bylaw amendment application ZBA 6/2020, increase the site-specific maximum height permissions to 17.5 meters, whereas 12 meters is currently permitted, be denied as planning staff find the application does not conform to the township of Lucan-Biddulph's official plan. Thank you, and available for any questions.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Dan. I will open this up for discussion. Any questions, comments? Councillor Regan, is that your hand up?
Yeah, it's me. I just want to know the new information from the MTO. I just got it and I was reading it. Can you kind of give me an explanation for that, Dan? What exactly does that mean?
Yeah, through the chair. So we did have an initial site plan pre-consultation meeting based on the existing permissions that are on the property for a proposal. In the meeting, it did come out from the Ministry of Transportation that they would actually review apartment buildings as commercial development of lands as opposed to residential. So based on the provincial policies, commercial development is required to set back 14 meters from the right of way. So basically 14 meters from the property line abutting Richmond Street.
Right.
We did ask for clarification on that further, and actually received it at 3:30 today, that given the location of the lands and its proximity to the connecting link, they would consider decreasing that 14-meter required setback, but it would have to respect the existing street line that's already established on Richmond Street. And further, it would have to set back slightly more than wherever that existing street line is. So with respect to that, where that setback line actually sits now is a bit of a question mark, and it would have to be further investigated to make sure to look at where those average setback lines are for the existing street development on Richmond Street, and then basically going from there and stepping back slightly. So that technically is in the hands of MTO for their final say and approval.
So I guess may I, Madam Mayor, sorry.
Absolutely.
So I'm just concerned now where that building's going to be. I'm asking because I'm not sure now what I'm maybe not following. Is it still 14 meters off the highway?
Through the chair.
I'm not following, sorry.
Through the chair, yeah, no, that's a good point. So the existing street line along Richmond Street appears to be lesser than 14 meters from the property line abutting Richmond Street. When we did, again, we were just using our aerial imagery and doing calculations, and it appeared to be somewhere around 8 to 9 meters, which is consistent with the zoning that is approved on the lands for an 8-meter setback along Richmond Street. That would have to be further verified and then approved. That reduction would have to be approved by MTO through their actual permit analysis.
And sorry, just a follow-up. And do we have any idea when that's going to happen?
Through the chair. So generally that would be a case where the developer is required to seek permits from MTO. At that point, MTO would then provide the final approval as to what they deemed as necessary for the setback. Again, it appears to be somewhere around 8 meters. It'd probably be a bit more than that, but that's kind of in our initial discussion with the MTO, that seemed to be where it was, which is consistent with the existing zoning.
Guess probably anywhere between 8 meters roughly and 14. Like it's not going to be any more than 14. It's going to be in that zone. Is that safe to say?
Through the chair to Mayor, yes, that's correct. It wouldn't extend beyond 14 meters. It would be the lesser of 14 meters.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Just staying on the setback.
Yep.
Staying on the setback topic, and then I'll let Daniel, I don't know if he's got more. Just what was presented to the public and we debated, I believe, was 8 meters. Is that correct?
Through the chair to Councilor Manders, yes, that's correct. I believe the initial concept was 8 meters. It might have been slightly more than 8 meters.
Gotcha. So, and now that maybe can be maintained with a permit, or the applicant now has a choice that they know they don't need to go to the MTO if they go to 14 meters. That'd be a correct statement?
Through the chair, technically speaking, because this site falls outside of the connecting link, MTO still has authority to issue approvals. So regardless of what the municipal permissions are and where a building would be built, if it was set back 14 meters, they would still be required to get a permit from MTO.
So even because I thought the news, the news after the public meeting was that it had to be 14 meters, that was their, we'll call it their rules, regulations. As long as they weren't asking for forgiveness on that, then they wouldn't have to deal with the MTO. But you're saying if they're 14 meters or 15 meters, they still have to get a permit, is what you're saying.
Sure, yes, that's correct.
Okay, well, thank you.
I think like even at the 8 meters that we thought it was, they would have had to get a permit because it's MTO has that setback. So regardless of what it is, they still have to go through MTO. Okay. Any other discussion on the property? Councillor Westman.
So I'd like to address the concerns about the height. I realize our official plan does have some parameters in there. I can also say that our plan going forward for this year is to review the official plan and look at the continuing needs of our community and what that looks like. So I've spoken with the Verhoogs. As a matter of fact, we did a little site inspection today to get a feel for the size and scale and positioning and so on, and just get a bit of a look at it. And there's some things that that I learned for the first time today is about where it actually is and what its scale is. And I know we've had residents come forward with concerns about the shadowing and sight lines and things like that, and those can be addressed simply by positioning and through engineering. But the one that gets me the most is the small town feel. And Councillor Reagan and myself had some discussion, and as have we, with others here in the room. The reality is that over the last 14 years, Lucan has doubled in size. There's been about 630 new homes built in the area, and it has changed the very nature of our small town. And as far as buildings, but a small town is not about buildings, it's about people. And people come to Lucan for the small town feel, and they're getting it. And 630 new homes have arrived, and they're getting it too. And it really hasn't changed the nature of the community as much as it's changed the volume of our property or our town limit signs. And I realize that this is something that people are looking at and they have trepidations about, but I also realize there's a great need for rental apartments. There's a great need for higher density development in order to be able to meet the growth of our community. So, I mean, I appreciate all the work that our planner has done, Dan, and I do appreciate that. I think that we're in a position where we can make some decisions for the future of our community that are not going to change the nature of what we have. And, I want to make that very clear from I'm the old salt here on council. I've been around a long time and I've seen a lot of change, but it hasn't changed what Lucan is as a small town. It's changed the size of it, and that's it. So that's my 2 cents on the matter.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Westman. Any other questions, comments, clarifications from Dan? Deputy Mayor.
Well, I guess for me, I'm, and I agree. That's why in that subdivision, obviously for the density, we approved the apartments there in that area of land, and we do need that type of optional living in Lucan. And, and that's, we're not really, I don't feel we're changing our intent for that land. It was for 12 meters. The people that moved in there had the ability to review our official plan, drive around our community, had the ability to go to the township office and go, you know what, there's going to be a 12-meter apartment building there. And I feel they would have felt that. I hope council will keep that. That we like that, we see that. And I agree also with Alex, we are eventually going to be reviewing our official plan. I just think, again, I don't know, without more debate with council, debate with staff, the planning department, where the barometer is for me for height. This is you know, I don't want this to lead our vision, and I don't want this isn't going to lead, this just can't lead my vision. As you know, there is no, Dan can't answer this, but this is a concern of mine, that at a 17.5-meter height building, we've set a barometer for regular height living, and an overall height of a flat roof at 6 stories. And that I'm not in favor of. And again, for me, it's about defending things for our community. And I do, you know, I struggle with, can we defend this if somebody wants to put up a 6-story building, or is this a new barometer that we pass? And unfortunately, again, until there's no OMB hearing, no one, I don't think, can answer that definitively. But that's a concern of mine. And I just don't think we have enough tools in our toolbox right now for this type of, you know, again, protecting ourselves. Other people I've talked to have talked about bonus clauses, or you can, you know, unique situations you do to properties. But we're not there yet. Our staff isn't there yet. That you know, I don't think we are there yet as a council. I don't know if the applicant has an appetite to wait till our official plans, you know, reviewed. This has obviously created a lot of discussion, but for me, I'm not going to have this lead my vision. So, thank you.
Thank you for that, Deputy Mayor. Any other comments, discussion from the council? Councillor Reagan.
No, and I'm aware, and I thank Dan for the work he's done, and I'm aware of what the official plan is. And I actually looked at it today, and it does say in this plan that, and it did recognize that we have between 1 and 5 story buildings in the community, just not a lot, but we do have those. But when I've talked to the planner, and I've talked to residents, I've talked to the builders 3 times, I've been out at the site twice. And the first time I got shooed off, I don't know why, but I think that I really do believe that, like, we're sort of at a crossroads, and the plan also says that we need to think about the future. And when I first moved here, and I'm just going to echo a little bit about what Councillor Westman said. When I first moved here, you know, this was a place of choice, and it was, you know, and I have not been here as long as everyone else. And, you know, we've got historic families here that have been here for a very long time. We've got, you know, 40% of the families here, and 40% of the families are new. And I'm kind of, you know, maybe a little bit longer than the 4-year, and I'm in that group. And I thought, you know, moving forward and having, you know, either a mid-rise building or, you know, I thought, well, all these buildings are being built, the 600 homes are across the street from me here on Nicoline. And it didn't lose that feel, but I really think we're at a crossroads, because our population, and I'm thinking about 5-10 years down the road, is, you know, what do we want Lucan to look like? And I understand what the deputy mayor is saying. We've had discussions about this, but I'm thinking now at this point, is that we need to, I think, I don't know if the word step it up a little bit, but we are at that crossroads. I mean, we're promoting businesses. We've got so many more new residents. I mean, we want to let people know we're open for business. I don't know, and again, I don't know if this is an appropriate time to ask the question, but I don't know whether or not we can be specific about what's actually going to go into that space. I was a little concerned when I heard about the MTO setbacks, and that's why I asked again. The other thing too, that kind of that sort of stuck with me, is that, and I'm gonna say it, but we have people that are neighbors that are developing this and building this, and they're living in our community and they're investing in the community, and that's something that I really like. And I'm gonna be honest with you. I think, yeah, like these are people that we're going to see them every day, kind of thing. And I just like that. And that speaks, I think, to the culture in Lucan, that we've got people who live in Lucan that want to invest in Lucan. And I think, and I'm not afraid of the height. I'm not going to worry about that. I think a year from now, if it happens, in a year from now, we're going to say, that's a really nice looking building. That's a good decision that we made. So that's just my 2 cents as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments, discussion? Councillor Mastarakis. Oh, you're muted.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm aligning more with Deputy Mayor. I think it's a bigger discussion with more input from the community. We've had a lot of input currently, but it's part of the strategy. And what's that definition of a small town? Small town feel can have, can be, mid-rise, can be 3-story. What do we want to be when we grow up, kind of thing, and long term. But I think it's a bigger discussion around our strategy and vision, and not necessarily one that we can make tonight to increase our height at this meeting. I think we need to work with the staff, as Deputy Mayor said, and work with the community to find out what why they come to Lucan, and what this will look like with services and so forth, traffic in the future. So it's a larger discussion for me.
Thank you for that. So a couple questions, Dan. Councillor Reagan brought up about holding what has been presented to the developer. And I guess what sort of restrictions, I guess that's the word I'm looking for, can we put on the property to say to them that this is what's presented, this is what you've presented, this is what needs to go on there. From a height standpoint, I think if I remember correctly, and I've looked back on my notes, you mentioned that we could put a restriction on there that would reference something like 17.5 meters to 5 stories, whatever is less, I guess, that would protect it in, should the property flip. I guess that's my first question.
Through the chair, Madam Mayor, yes, we've kind of just jumped around it in the past as to how one can ensure that development on the lands as presented is what's implemented. So the best way to do that, I guess, would be to introduce site-specific provisions through an exception zone that, again, would lock in things like X amount of meters from the west property line, from the north property line, the east to the south, a maximum height of 17.5 meters, or a height maximum of 17.5 meters to a maximum of 5 stories. X amount of density permitted per hectare. Those are kind of the general ones that work really well to control development. The other things you can add in is a minimum outdoor landscaping space requirement, or minimum buffer distances for landscaping from parking stalls. I've seen it done many different ways. The harder one to control is the actual look of the building. So you can say, setbacks of this perimeter, this maximum height, and this much outdoor amenity space, but it's more the actual materiality of the building, of what the end product is going to be, and the look. That's the harder one to actually control. You can certainly go through an architectural elevation and pick out based on percentages as much as you possibly can try to guarantee. But at the end of the day, there can be changes, and rightly so. There's some situations where they go out and cost buildings and then determine that certain products that they've shown on elevations are just cost prohibitive, and it's not possible to do that. So then it gets into a situation where that you're almost in a negotiation with the municipality through the site plan agreement as to how best to implement that. So at the end of the day, there's certain aspects that you 100% can guarantee, and there's certain aspects that you try your best to guarantee, but you can't 100% know that that's exactly the product that you get at the end of the day.
Right.
If you're looking at it from the pure perspective of the elevation that's shown.
Okay. To the question of the maximum 17.5 to a maximum of 5 stories. So let's just say they go to build this, and for whatever reason, The conceptual drawing that was presented to us, for whatever reason, can't be built. And just to refresh council, it's, from what I understand, it's 5 stories. The units have higher ceiling level, and then the roof lines are decorative, for lack of a better word. Lack of a better word. So let's say for whatever reason, whoever he's building with, blah, 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 it doesn't work out. And now that concept is no longer available to him. He comes back, putting that restriction maximum 17 to maximum 5 stories. Let's say if he can't build with the decorative, would he be kept at 5 stories flat? Could he do 5 stories flat roof at 17 and a half? I don't know if I'm explaining that very well. But yeah, I don't know. Am I?
Through the chair to the mayor. Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. The concern, I think, from your perspective is if they come back with a different elevation, could they just build a flat building all the way up to 17 and a half meters that's 5 stories tall?
Yeah.
It's kind of what you're getting at.
Exactly.
So a way that can be regulated through zoning provisions would be to cap a maximum height of a building based on the actual livable footprint. So between floor to floor heights. Okay. So you cap the building at, say in this case, I'm not sure how tall the parapet is on the top of it, but it kind of undulates up and down as you go across the building. But you could say for instance, the maximum height of this building shall be 16 meters. However, we would allow a permitted encroachment of this additional height, which would accommodate that architectural feature of the parapet.
Gotcha.
So that's a way that you could, again, try to avoid a situation where you're not getting what is shown on the plan, but you're still comfortable with the fact that even, you have to be comfortable with the fact that this is a 5-story building regardless.
Exactly.
And where you see that 5-story building and the height as being, it's just that additional architectural feature on top. So that's something that if council was considering, we'd have to go back and speak with the applicant and developer to figure out what exactly those parameters are on the elevation of the structure.
Gotcha. To the deputy mayor's point, so, for the sake of discussion, we pass this and approve this. What does that mean for future developments in the community? I mean, we always do say that we take each application at its own merit, and we look at it, and that's the way we're supposed to, make our decisions. But is there an unspoken, that we are setting a precedent that this is now the new standard? Especially when in your report and your recommendation, it is so strongly weighed with the official plan.
Yeah, through the chair. So the report did specifically look at 3 specific provisions in the official plan with relation to residential development and the direction as to how it's perceived to be developed moving forward. So it focused a lot on trying to establish what is that existing character that needs to be respected within Lucan. So that's I guess from that perspective, like always, planning decisions are not held to precedent. Each site is based on its own merits. Any situation that you get into, like on this particular site, you could see that, let's just compare this one to the other one that is also before council or will be before council. The setbacks on this site are much greater than you'd see on that property. And that's just by virtue of the size of the lot, basically. So there's different parameters that you're going to judge when you look at a development proposal as to whether or not it's appropriate. With that said, the planning report looked at what the existing character is in Lucan by way of establishment of what are the existing developments and what are the existing zoning provisions. So I would say generally, from a higher level, if there's permissions in place for the establishment of higher buildings, then that would weigh into future planning decisions for whether or not those heights are appropriate. It's an aspect of it. It's not the be all end all, but it would weigh into an aspect of that. And a board, certainly an appeals board, would look at that as well.
Okay, gotcha. And just to refresh my memory, this is 51 units. The density is 51 units, right?
For the mayor, yes, that's correct.
So I've got a couple questions, so I'm still going to go on, and unless I see anybody from council put their hand up, I'll still keep going. With regards to the setback against the property line for the houses on Spencer, right? That's Spencer, the one that goes behind it, correct? So the setback actually is only on that property would be 3 meters. So potentially that building or a building could be built just 3 meters from the property line from those neighbors.
Through the chair, Madam Mayor. So based on existing provisions that are in the zoning, that's correct. There is only a 3 meter setback requirement for interior side yards.
Okay.
Both that side yard, so the properties that face Spencer, as well as the ones on Old Clover Drive, for future development would be subject to that same provision.
Okay. Okay.
Kathy, sorry, Mayor, just staying on that theme, just quick, sorry, and then I'll let you go again.
Yep.
Obviously, just stay on that theme. I just want to clarify that the balcony overhanging, that doesn't, that 3 meters would include that, correct? It's not like you can't have a balcony, and I have no idea how long it overhangs. If it's 1.5 meters, can I'll use that as an example. Can the balcony then be 1.5 meters from lot line, the balcony, or can you maintain that or help that in site plan if it can be?
So through the chair to Councillor Manders, there, in review of the Lucan Biddulph zoning bylaw, there's no reference to permitted encroachments for balconies. So it talks about unenclosed decks and the like, but it doesn't specifically note balconies. So it would be up to an interpretation of zoning as to whether or not that would apply to balconies. And if it does, there could potentially be a permitted encroachment that is beyond the 3 meters for something such as a balcony. I know that in the past, that has been interpreted to include balconies, even though it doesn't specifically state.
And how do we, obviously I would be in favor of that and feel it should have, and I would hope our staff and our council of the day, then that was missed dearly, I would say, if that can't be held, and that'd be very unfortunate. So.
That is correct. That is something that we have noted for a housekeeping bylaw to add in that clarification moving forward.
Okay, so, I have to be perfectly honest. I have flip-flopped on this since day one. And if you called me on one day, I would be completely supportive of this plan. And if you called me the next day, I would have I would not be. I have to say that when I read Dan's report initially on the weekend, that his arguments for voting or for recommending against the application and putting the weight of the official plan has really stuck with me. And I have played it over in my head for the last 4 days or whenever we got this report on Friday. Because to the deputy mayor's point, are we letting development dictate how we move forward, or are we as a community deciding how our community wants to look and move forward? And I've talked to the applicant, I've looked at the site, I've gone to the other building that is being proposed by the applicant. There's an existing one in the city of London. I've gone, I've looked at it, and I do think that it would make a incredible statement driving into the village as you're coming up Highway 4. And I have, to Councillor Reagan's point, while we can't make this personal and we have to take the applicant out of it, there is something to say about having somebody in your community choosing to invest in your community. And he has other properties in the community, and he's done a great job of cleaning up those properties. And anybody that knew those properties before and sees them now, I think we can all agree that that was a great investment, and it's been a great turnaround. So, I believe that whatever he puts on the property, if the application is turned down and he has to go a different route, then I do have faith that for the very reasons that he's a member of our community, he has pride in the properties that he owns, that whatever he puts on there will be still an asset to our community. So where am I today with all of this? What is the day that I'm looking at? I tell you, the part that really sticks with me and is that, and Councillor Manders or Deputy Mayor Manders said it earlier, or referenced it earlier when, we made a decision in 2017, I think, to go from 10 meters to 12 meters. So the applicant knew what he was building, and we were fine with that. And so buyer beware sort of thing. But, when I look at what the applicant is proposing and where it is going on the property, where he's proposing that it goes, and the green space around it, I really do believe that in the long run, this is a better use of this property than what could happen. That 3-meter setback from those residents on Spencer, I don't believe is what the intention would have been when we were considering a part. I don't think that we even considered it. I think back to that conversation that we had when we entertained that. And I don't think we fully understood the impact of what a 3 or potentially 4-story apartment building against those houses on Spencer would mean and would look like. And personally, I think if we can hold the applicant to as much as we can to what he's presented through site-specific restrictions, as our planner has said we could do. I think, if I'm correct, that there are certain things, like I know the site plan is not a public process, and I think, if I remember correctly, there are certain things that you can make sure happen at site plan, again, to hold the applicant to his intent. I am more comfortable with the email that came out from MTO today, understanding that there's a better chance that he can, or that the applicant, what was presented back to us a number of weeks ago, there's a better chance that it can be held to that as opposed to the 14 meters. That was the new information that we found out a number of, I guess, a couple of weeks ago. So, you know, I certainly, my struggle absolutely has been with the official plan, knowing that we have this, we're going to be revisiting it and we're going to be reviewing it, you know, hopefully come the fall. I do believe that in the long run, that this building with the green space around it, you know, Councillor Regan talked about, and Councillor Westman talked about, you know, that a small town isn't just buildings, but, you know, when the way that that is being proposed with the green space certainly makes it a more attractive building and site than what I think was what was proposed by the original developer a number of years ago. You know, the reality is, and we can only, and I understand this, we can only look at what is presented in front of us today, but certainly with discussions with the applicant, should this not be approved, you know, he has some other options, and the other options would be higher density, more compact buildings, which I personally don't think is what would make the statement and be what it is that we're trying to look, the look that we're trying to achieve in that subdivision. So that's where I am at this evening. Ron, did you have some things that you wanted to add in?
Yeah, I think I don't want to repeat what you just said there, because I agree. And with all due respect to Dan, he's the planner. He's given you the planning advice, and the planning advice is based on the current policies. But I just want to state that, you know, we've been 3 stories in Lucan since probably 1880. So it's been 140 years. I think, you know, while this proposal is maybe a little bit ahead of the curve in the updating of the official plan process, it is an opportunity. And I don't think we want to miss out on this opportunity, because like the mayor just said a few minutes ago, this proposal, in my mind, as the CAO, I think it's a great opportunity. I think it makes a great statement. You know, the applicant has gone over and above as far as the green space, parking he's gone overboard on parking, which is a benefit. And I think he's done that from the standpoint that he knows the rental market in our community and what needs to happen. And I think if council were to reject this proposal, I think some of the neighbors on Spencer and Old Clover Drive, I think, could end up in a vastly different position and a negative position as far as that goes. So I think, you know, in my mind as your CAO, I think this is an opportunity to move forward. It may be a little ahead of the curve as far as the official plan goes, but I do think that this is a great building, and I think this is an opportunity. So with that, Madam Mayor, I do believe Ms. Dornbush has a couple of comments that she's been waiting to make. So thank you.
Okay. Okay. I guess we'll open it up to the applicant's planner. I didn't realize that was going to be an option, but anyways. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members of council, thank you for this opportunity to speak to this. This does allow us, I know the last meeting was the public meeting, but now that the staff report and the recommendation has come forward, this is greatly appreciated, giving us the opportunity to speak to the report and some of the comments that were outlined in it. I recognize that a lot of the discussion this evening has been with regards to the official plan in particular. And I've had discussions with Dan as well regarding the primary position of staff with regards to how they reach the recommendation that you see before you. Essentially, what it weighs down to is what is the existing character of Lucan. And that is the basis, the policy basis outlined in the official plan. But I think what's important to also remember is that while CEO Raymer has suggested that we're a little bit ahead of the curve, but I think it's really important to note that this official plan's been in place since 2015. Obviously, it's a continuation of previous official plans. And if we are speaking specifically to the character, I think most importantly, in 2 separate sections, it talks about that new residential development is to respect and be sensitive to the small town character of the village. And in another policy, it says that the new residential development will be limited to ensure compatibility with existing development. If the small town feel of Lucan was entirely based on a maximum of 3 stories, it was never outlined that way in the official plan. So I really want council to put their minds to the fact that that wasn't specific, you know, recognizing that, yes, it is to be limited, but if it was that important for it to be limited to 3 stories, why was that not outlined that way? And in my view, from a planning perspective, it was outlined that way so that you can assess this on a site-by-site basis, which is typical of planning. And again, from a precedent perspective, as you had said, Madam Mayor, it would be very difficult to recreate the scenario of this site where you have such a large parcel with a larger scale building, but with the amount of open space. So the only time that you could ever possibly get into a precedent setting situation is when you have an identical scenario. And looking at the context of Lucan, there definitely would be little to no opportunity that this would ever recreate itself. So I think those are some of the things, and as well the official plan, as Councillor Reagan had outlined, it specifically states that the existing residential, while there's not a lot of them, but they do range in 1 to 5 stories. So they are there, while there may not be many, they're there. And as well, it's not a residential component, but from the westerly side of the municipality, as you come in from the west along County Road, I think it's 13, you have the grain facility. And the scale of that is quite large, but it's established, it's built into the community, and you know, everyone's used to it. But when you actually sit back and look at the scale of it, that is a scale that is similar to what we are proposing. It fits in with the community, it's always been there. But again, when you're talking about something new, it's always a little bit scary bringing something in like that. But again, I just want to speak to it from a policy basis. Obviously, from a planning perspective, a lot of the policies are based on interpretation, but it is, in my opinion, the policies absolutely do allow this. There are no restrictions on the height, and it does allow for this scale. And it's important as well that while there is a suggestion to maybe wait through an official plan review, a 3-story building was assessed in 2017 when the zoning bylaw amendment went in place. Since that time, there's been a new provincial policy. It just recently came out in 2020. So we have to look at that as well. So your official plan is from 2015. There's been a new provincial policy. So there is definitely, you know, a move in the residential intensification inwards and upwards. So that's something that as well, that since 2017 has come in place. So I think that the analysis has already been done on the appropriateness of an apartment building and whether or not the scales, I guess it's just a matter of, it's a differing opinion as to what fits and what doesn't. But when we're speaking from a planning perspective with regards to transition in scale, there's 2 ways that you can transition in scale from one property to the next. One is by having interceding buildings, interceding land uses that drop in scale, or you provide a substantial setback that allows that open space. And that's how we've accomplished that here. So we do absolutely feel from a planning perspective, we comply with the policies. And this can be supported based on the existing policy structure. So just one other thing to speak to with regards to the elevations. I know there was some discussion about whether the building has changed. Because we have built this before, we absolutely do know that there will not be any major changes to the building at all. The design has been established, short of any building code changes from when the previous building was constructed. We do anticipate that what we have presented to you absolutely is what you're going to see on that property. And we have, as I've outlined in the previous meeting and through my discussions with staff, we are in full support of zoning restrictions that will tie the development that we proposed in place, and we have no issues with that at all.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Appreciate that. Councillor or Deputy Mayor Manders.
No, just to respond to the CAO and the mayor's comments. Again, I'm reflecting on what you're saying, but again, the ability for everybody to know where they were living and the impact is there for everybody. And we represent our whole community. And again, my concern is every street in Lucan-Biddulph. That's my concern, not 2 streets in Lucan. And again, setting this new barometer that's very offside of our official plan and being denied by our planner is a concern of mine. And my concern is our whole community, not 2 streets. So thank you.
All right, any other comments? Councillor Mastarakis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree with Deputy Mayor Manders. I also, a question procedurally, we've allowed the planner from the building to speak, but we haven't allowed anybody else in the community to come back and speak on is that procedurally correct, fair in this process?
That would be a question for the CAO. Ron?
So typically in the planner can correct me if I'm wrong here. It's not unusual for the applicant to be there because if there are questions or there's other comments that need to be made, those are typical. So the public participation is for the members of the public, in which that was the meeting we had, I think it was the 16th of June. So this one, we're trying to advance the application. So.
Do you have any follow-up to that, Councillor Mastarakis? Okay. So Dan Fitzgerald, in the event that council votes against your recommendation, we've talked about perhaps putting some site-specific restrictions, and you've outlined a number of them. What would be the next steps for that? Like, I know that the bylaw would not be in place to approve that. I'm assuming it would have to go back to staff to be drafted, and likely we would bring that up, I'm assuming at the August meeting. But I guess what would the next steps be should we decide to vote against your recommendation?
Through the chair to the mayor, that puts me in kind of an awkward position to answer that one, but
and I appreciate that.
Generally speaking, in these situations, council would generally direct staff to go back and implement, or through a motion, direct staff to go back and implement the restrictive zoning provisions to the best fit to ensure development is realized as shown on the conceptual site plan.
Okay. All right. So any further discussion, questions of council, or questions for Dan? Any further comments? So with that, there is a recommendation from the planner and I don't think, Tina, that you printed the recommendation. No. Dan? Yep.
through the mayor, if you are considering a site-specific motion,
Mhm.
now would be the time to enter that
Now,
and not make a vote on the recommendation.
gotcha. Thank you very much. All right. So at this point, it would be time for a motion. Dave, do you have a question or?
I'll make a motion to accept the planner's report. I'm going to seconder.
From Councillor Mastarakis. And then all opposed to that motion. So that motion is lost. I guess maybe the question should have been, can we make a motion, a site-specific one at this point? And I would maybe look for somebody procedural on that. Is now the time that we could entertain a site-specific motion? Okay. So is there anybody out there that would like to make a site-specific motion as to the same sort of wording that Dan said would work, that would send it back to council? Councillor Westman. And yep.
Yeah, so I would like to make a motion that the site-specific restrictions be placed on the property for elevation placement according to the planner's comments.
So I think it's to hold the applicant or to hold the developer to what he's proposing as best, right? Okay, can I get a seconder for that one? Councillor Regan. All opposed to that motion. And that one's carried. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so I guess the next steps, maybe, I know that this does put Dan in a precarious position. So I don't know, Ron, did you want to speak to the next steps on that?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So Dan, maybe I could ask you to confirm that the next step would be for you to bring forward to the next meeting of council a site-specific one, exactly like the previous motion says, tied to the proposal as presented by the applicant. Is that correct?
Sure, yeah. Just, I was joking before I did take things personally. But yeah, no, it would basically direct staff to go back to introduce the zoning bylaw, work with the applicant to implement the provisions, site-specific provisions as shown on the conceptual site plan and elevations. So we would seek to bring that back at the next council meeting for a vote.
Okay, very good. Okay, that's great. So moving on to the next issue that we've got, and that has to do with a letter that we received from a resident on Levitt Street. And I believe we all received the letter. At this point, maybe what I will, I don't know how to proceed with this one, that we look for maybe comment from Dan or Ron, and then we can entertain some questions from council on this. Yep, Ron.
Madam Mayor, if I may start, I think there's a misunderstanding here, and it's a common one. It is very difficult for the average person to understand the tax system and how it relates to zoning, and the fact that the zoning bylaw doesn't necessarily marry up to what MPAC, and MPAC is the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, and they are charged with responsibility for taxation. They're the ones that deliver the tax roll every December, upon which the following year's property tax revenue is derived. So I've asked Dan Fitzgerald and Tina to go back through the zoning bylaws, the various zoning bylaws, and we cannot find, and the other two can confirm that, going back as far as the former Township of Biddulph zoning bylaw from 1979 shows the property in question zoned, I think it was GC, which stood for, at the time, general commercial. That zoning has always been commercial from what we can find in our records. Every subsequent zoning bylaw since then has been zoned commercial. Now, not necessarily does that mean that the property taxes levied were at a commercial rate. And I don't, he's shown proof that at one point in time he was being taxed at a residential rate. But if I could make an example of in Lucan, the house immediately north of the liquor store, for example, it I believe lies within the central commercial zone. So that's a C1 zone. However, they are not taxed at a commercial rate. It's a house. It's being taxed at a residential rate. So there's another example of the zoning doesn't really marry up with what MPAC has. Now, the one comment he did make was that he did talk to somebody at the assessment office in London, and they apparently said that it was at the behest of the township that it was changed from residential to commercial. I don't know how to answer that. I scratch my head as to why someone would say that. I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. It doesn't make sense to me because, like I said, the zoning, we've never changed the zoning on the property from all the records we can find. So, I don't, that's not to say that it can't be changed to residential. And I think that's an important point. There's a process we have to go through. It's called a rezoning. And it is a possibility of getting that done. But I think to sort of resolve this, because the allegation, I guess, is that we did something, and I don't think we did anything. So in order to get that message across and sort of move forward with what the applicant is hoping to do, what staff is proposing is that we reach out to this gentleman and try and get him to attend a meeting, a face-to-face meeting, because we are now able to do that. And if he could bring his lawyer, who he refers to in his letter, I believe, I think we can resolve this and sort of explain it to him and show him how he can move forward with getting what he's looking for, and that's a residential designation. So I think that's all I can say on that.
Any questions, Councillor Westman?
Yeah, I've spoken with the property owner a number of times. He's just lives down the street, and I knew his father, who owned the property prior to him. And I understand his confusion. I understand what's going on there. He showed me a number of tax bills, and it was taxed as residential for a number of years, and then just changed in 2012. And I know, for me as a taxpayer too, I would look at that and go, okay, what's that all about? But what gets me is that when the sewer project was going through in Granton, it was his understanding and his father's understanding that it was residential property, and for future development, they put in 3 sewer stubs in the position where the lots were perceived to be. And so that was their understanding then. And then, paying residential property taxes for that length of time. So that's where the confusion came from. And I kind of feel the guy's concern, because he has interest in the property. Somebody's come and shown some interest, and he wants to be able to move forward. So whatever we can do to help the guy, I really feel compelled to do that. So that's my 2 cents.
Deputy Mayor.
No, I actually thought that's what Ron was going to say, and that's good. I think that, and Ron, you can correct me, obviously, if I'm wrong. Like it almost reminded me of the situation. It's not quite, but almost like Brian Smith's property. I believe when the sewers went in, he actually didn't stub them, so a little bit different. But I think the lots were created maybe after, obviously, the development of the subdivision, maybe. And I think what you're saying is that, the remedy for this is that the last steps haven't been taken on the property. That is to create the lot and make it residential and change it. And I think that's what you're saying. And then there's never a guarantee of that, but that's the process that just hasn't gone through council. So is that kind of correct what I'm saying?
Yep.
So through you, Madam Mayor, to answer the Deputy Mayor's question, at the lots that are shown on the map have been there for eons. to complicate matters, we're talking a registered plan of subdivision that was probably done 100 years ago when the railway was still in place there. Now, prior to amalgamation, Biddulph passed a bylaw, and I believe it was in preparation for the installation of communal sanitary sewers in Granton, where they passed a bylaw to say that old plans of subdivision were deemed to be no longer plans of subdivision. So even though those lots show on an old map, they're really not individual lots. But there was 3 lots that sort of, I guess, ran east to west and faced the Thompson's feed mill there on an unopened road allowance. I believe the street was Dominion Street. So I think everybody recognized that there's no way that it doesn't make economic sense to open a road, to construct a road, to have 3 lots on one side of the street. You can't single load a road and make that pay. So I think at the time when, the whole discussion was had with regards to, do you put a stub in? Should you put a stub in? I think the council of the day had passed a motion that every lot should be serviced. And economically, that's the cheapest time to put in a stub. So it was the right decision. Everybody, he made the right decision to do what he did. I think, and quite possibly maybe his lawyer has a document that says that, council agreed to look at changing the designation to residential in the next zoning bylaw update. I don't know what he's got, and this meeting will allow him to bring that information forward so we can move forward. Because, at the end of the day, if that's what council said or made that inference to his lawyer, then I think we're going to honor that. There's no question there. And I do think that that's a good spot for a house. Don't get me wrong, and I'm not a planner, but there's a few hurdles that have to be crossed, but there's a process we go through to do that. So.
I don't think that, I think that the direction needs to exactly that staff go back and reach out to Mr. Nixon and have that discussion. But just wondering, when you've gone back, have you just gone back to amalgamation, or have you gone back further? Like, is there any way that the property could have been zoned residential when it was just Biddulph?
The last zoning bylaw I have is the one just prior to amalgamation, and that's 1997. I don't have any prior to that.
Yep.
So I can't answer that. I don't.
No, I was just curious on that one. Thought, well, maybe that's where things changed or something. But Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, it's just weird. I'm hearing a lot of clicking. I don't know if anyone else is. Almost like someone's doing some chips, poker chips. But everyone appears to be on mute, more or less. And I didn't know if there was a guest or if there's somebody online here that we don't know that they're not on mute. I don't know if Lisa can tell or Ron can tell, but is anyone else hearing this clicking? And it's because we got a lot of meeting to go yet, and I'm hearing clicking.
Yeah, it seems to be coming from Ron, I think, somehow.
Oh yeah,
is it my habit to do that?
Oh, it's probably your clicker.
Sorry.
You got
I'll drop the pen. There you go. Sorry.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Good. No. I thought maybe someone's running a poker table.
No. So yeah, I agree, Madam Mayor. I don't think we need a formal motion to council. We will automatically just reach out to Mr. Nixon and try and arrange a face-to-face meeting so we can get this resolved and move forward. So.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I guess thank you for staying on, Dan, for that part of the conversation. And you can sign off, I guess. You don't, unless you want to hang around for the rest. But and maybe if council will indulge, could we just take a 5-minute break? I just want to go get another glass of water. So if we can just rise for a couple minutes and then get back at whatever the time is. Just wait a minute more for the other councillors to rejoin us. Okay, so I'm sure that Councillor Westman and Deputy Mayor will rejoin us momentarily. So we've got a quorum here, so we'll keep moving on to Public Works. So Jeff.
Good evening, Madam Mayor. My first scheduled report was on Old Clover Village assumption, which we are working through at the present moment. I'm going to not present that report tonight. There has been something come up that I need clarification on before we even begin to talk about assumption. So I'm just going to pull that one out. So I will move on to the second one, which I have three in a row. They are on drain. We had tenders close on the 3 drains. And the first one is the Casey McCarthy drain. We had two bids. I guess maybe what I should do is say the nice thing that has come back is all the drains, all of them have come back under budget, considerably under budget, which is nice. I'm hoping that's because we worked hard at getting them out during the COVID situation, and that there is some room out with these with the drainage companies looking for some work. So it's nice to see them come in under anywhere from 25 to 30% under budget what we expected. So that's a great surprise. So or a great I shouldn't say surprise, a great thing that come back on that. So on the first one, the Casey McCarthy, we're recommending that we take low bid, which is AG Hayter Contracting, and that we move forward upon council approve that tender and award it upon the reading of the third reading of the bylaw, which will take place at the next council meeting. So that's the report, the first report.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
So
do you want, yep. Do you want me, Madam Mayor, to go through the 3?
You might as well, but I just,
okay.
So are we going to accept the tenders tonight?
Yeah.
And then it's awarded at the next meeting?
Yes. So so what this allows us to get the contractors basically ready, because they have to start ordering pipe and they have to start getting stuff in place. So it's crucial that we kind of keep moving forward with it, even though we still have to wait for a third reading of the bylaw. But at this point, with the quarter revision that we had tonight, there's really, all we do is it's just a waiting period.
Okay.
So
perfect. Thank you for that clarification.
On the second report, we did not take low tender. We took the second low tender, which was recommending, I shouldn't say take, I said recommending, and that's AG Hayter. There's a difference of about 3% between the low bid and the second low bid. And in consultation with Spreetz and Associates, we talked about the starting date for the AG Hayter was in August. And the start date, which could happen for Van Bree Enterprises, was next March. And with the situation that a lot of the farmers, it takes a number of years to get this in place already, and that a lot of the farms are setting up with wheat for these drains to go, and part of it is to move forward with it. So the feeling was that with the start date of August warrant the extra money to be spent on the 3%, and we're still considerably under budget. So that 3% certainly will be will not meet an increase to anybody that's a part of this drain. And just a side note, There's two farmers and one property in Granton that amount to 98% of the cost of this drain that'll be paying it. And all three of them are hoping that it gets done. So that's why we've approved or recommended that one. So that's the number 2 report. And then on the third report, it is an open drain, meaning that it's going to be used more for high ho. So we had 4 bids come back. We are recommending that we take Graham Contracting at the low bid. Stuart, I was talking to Stuart today. He's looking forward to being back in the Lucan area. So really not much there. We're recommending taking low bid on that one.
It's funny that you should bring that up. I was going to ask, that's not a company name that I recognize. So but we have done work with them in the past, or I assume maybe in your past employment, you've done work with them.
Stuart Graham, they concentrate more on open drains. So like ditches, they do a lot of brushing. They're not really into closed tile drains or a combination. So they didn't bid on the other 2 drains. So they're really a niche drainage company. They operate on the open side of things.
Great. Okay. So those motions we can entertain towards the end of the meeting.
Yep. Okay. To keep moving, because I know that we don't want to drag it. I have some verbal information for council. I'll try and keep it brief. The first one I just wanted to touch base with, that the ECEP did have some questions concerning our report that went in on the Heenan drain on the ABCA study. BM Ross has reviewed the questions and has sent an updated report from the ABCA back into the ECEP for their clarification on stuff. So this is all has to do with the expansion at the pollution treatment plant. So basically there is movement there. There is some questions around the Heenan drain, but BM Ross and ABCA are still moving that forward. The second item I wanted to touch on was the MTO has finalized the traffic signals, which is a great, I guess, a good thing to finally be able to say. An interesting point is that in the process of finalizing the traffic signals, they have asked us to have Clark sign off on the proposal, which was kind of a blindside all of a sudden. So just to let everybody know, we're meeting with Martin Clark tomorrow afternoon to talk about the design and to see where this is going to go. Chris Trainey from the county and myself and Ron are going to meet with Mr. Clark tomorrow. So just to keep council updated, that should be an interesting meeting. Number 3 on the item is that the Lake Huron Water System are asking for a steering committee from members from municipalities to look at how they're going to set the water system up in the future. They asked for both representative from a management side of things and also from a political side of things. So I think the mayor and myself will join the steering committee, and we'll see how that goes. We'll bring more information forward. It's a little dry, but it's really important. There's going to be, the city of London makes a lot of decisions on the water system, and how this plays out could have a cost effect to smaller municipalities in the future. So there's more to follow on that. From an operations point of view, we did fix a water main leak in Granton. Soon as we fixed it, we saw water usage go down in the area, and we also saw the sanitary side of things. Obviously, this water was leaking into the sanitary system. one way or the other. We're looking into that. There'll be more to be followed up on that, but we're looking at almost 20 cubic meters, well, almost 20 to 40 cubic meters a day has decreased on the sanitary side of things. That's huge. That's like 40 houses of material that are no longer going through the sanitary side of things. So great job for John and Andrew and Matt, and the road staff supported with Ryan and Joe in there. And I was out there for most of the day, and we got that water main fixed. Unfortunately, we had to take out a large section of road, sidewalk, and laneway. We will be probably budget-wise, we'll be over on water main repair this year, mainly because of that one, but it's fixed. Just a real quick Markov stump drain, municipal drain has been completed. Asphalt on Corsi has been completed, and the Nagel, the Richmond road bore has been completed, and everything looks in line with what the tender said it would be. So far Nagel is continuing on. We're looking at doing water services there next week. After that, topsoil will be followed, and the Nagel project is looking like it should draw near to a close in the next few weeks, which is great. Other than grass, growing grass is not great at this time of year. I've given permission to the contractor to use judgment if we're going to grow grass out there. So, but anyways, we're going to get everybody on water, and that's the main portion. So that's really all my updates, verbal updates for now. And unless anybody has any questions, I'll just kind of slow down.
Any questions for Jeff at this time? I was just going to say, with the water main, it sounded like all the little boys were out playing with their machines to fix it. So.
And we had lots of people from Granton. It was wonderful to see everybody came to visit us, and lots of friendly people up there, that's for sure. So
no, that's good. That's great that was fixed with such great results. Okay, again, sorry, any questions or comments for Jeff? Okay, moving on, Parks and Recreation, Paul.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In front of you is a report on the soccer field project. As you know, there's been much discussion of this between the Soccer Association, PRAC, and staff. An original project was determined, estimated by professionals at around 150,000. Some had said 125 to 150. We then consulted with Dillon's, as they determined they couldn't be completely accurate for estimate until they had topographic maps done. So Dillon's has presented us two options. Option A is to build one new full-size field and reconfigure the second field to get it to full size, as well as fix some drainage issues. And this project came back for a tender price of $273,900 with a contingency allowance of $40,000, bringing the subtotal contract price to $313,900. I also had asked Dillon's to present us an option for just constructing the one new field to replace the one that we are inevitably going to lose. And that price came back at $123,490 with a contingency allowance of $20,000 and a subtotal contract price of $143,490. Now, after receiving these numbers, I did go back to some of the professionals that we had the original conversation with, just to make sure that these were reasonable expectations for the project. And they had deemed that 250,000 seemed like a reasonable expectation, as they thought that maybe some of the values for grass seed were a little high. So they thought 250 would be a reasonable expectation. All throughout this process, the Soccer Association has emphasized that their growth is their largest concern, and being able to support that is their most important goal. They would like to make sure whatever is decided, that is not lost sight of. In fact, today we received from the Soccer Association a statement, and it just reads, Lucan is growing at a rapid rate with many young families residing in the area. The Lucan Soccer Association's goal is to allow all kids the opportunity to play. With the limited amount of space we currently have, we may have to turn kids away. Last year, with 2 large fields and a 3/4 field, Lucan Soccer was at capacity, and there was a real need for more fields to accommodate the increasing enrollment of players. This year alone, we would have registered close to 400 players, which does not include the men's and women's league. Losing the large field will put a severe strain on the soccer program that was already at capacity. Therefore, we need more fields one way or another. A new field behind the arena, replacing the field that will be lost to development, will only allow us to have what we currently have, but will not be sufficient for the near future. A plan could be to build this field with future plans to expand within 3 to 5 years. So with that being said, this has also been discussed many times at PRAC, and the majority of the PRAC committee is not in favor of a knee-jerk solution to an immediate problem, i.e. losing the field. PRAC would be more in support of a long-term solution for the better of the growing community over the next 20 to 30 years. Some members did also say, though, that soccer is an important, affordable sport for young families and should be supported. And placing everything crammed behind the community center could stifle growth for baseball, and they're concerned that there would be an issue with parking. Concerns were also raised about spending such a large sum of money on a project while there's still a major project in the works. We also had discussion at the PRAC committee and with the Soccer Association that if their season was to have a season with reduced fields, the staff should work with them to accommodate their troubles, i.e. utilizing the main hall, utilizing the ice surface while the ice is out for practices, or having practices in the parks, just limiting the fields to game use, as well as maybe approaching the men's and women's league to see if maybe they could go elsewhere for the season, as it's easier for adults, especially who live out in a rural community and have vehicles, that they can travel elsewhere. It's also important to note that there's been several, due to COVID-19, there's been significant slowdown in a lot of projects throughout the province, and staff would like to set up a meeting with the developers of the top soccer field to see if there is potential usage for spring, should their project not be ready to go. And I did, in fact, already actually have that conversation, and I reached out to the neighboring developers to discuss the future use of Field 3. And right now, they're not currently in a position to commit to any decisions yet, but they are happy to work with the township in any capacity should their planning allow for it. So there is some positive there. So with an alignment to the strategic plan, this priority, it undertake program planning coordination with community partners in response to local needs. We've had a lot of conversation between the Soccer Association and PRAC. So we've had quite a bit of input on this project, as I'm sure you all know. And then also provide opportunities to facilitate dialogue. So is staff's recommendation on this, that in consideration for future growth and expansion of the Lucan Soccer Association and their enrollment, and that this project could utilize all of the reserve funds currently put away, that development of a short-term solution at this time, we recommend that we utilize reserves allocated for soccer towards a long-term goal.
Okay. All right. Any questions, comments on this report? Deputy Mayor.
Well, no, it sounds like if soccer can, I like that. I think if they can get their head around realizing that starting next year that this is going to be the case, and they can schedule it, and if the adults, I don't know what assistance our staff does need to get involved or should get involved, but as I said to you before, Paul, I mean, a few phone calls and you would just think there'd be daylight hours on soccer fields between, I think, Exeter, I don't know, Huron Park, Lurie, Park Hill, is there any daylight hours to serve the size of field they need? And I think those will be important questions, at least to get back to them on. You know, I guess the question is for Ron. I've asked this question before, and I don't know if I'm phrasing it wrong. We need, and we're about to, but I don't know when the answer is, like the date, that the timeline of allocating future residential land in our community, which is supposed to represent, I think from the report I saw, 20 years of growth. So when I read Paul's report, to me, what an unknown. We don't know where 20 years of our growth is coming from, and we don't know where it's going. And you know, I don't know if I'm phrasing it wrong, but when will we know where the 20 years of growth of our community is going to be? And it should be soon, I think. And I think that would really help Paul.
Mm-hmm.
So through you, Madam Mayor, I think if I understand your question correctly, Deputy Mayor, it's how do we crunch the numbers to know how many fields we need over that planning horizon? Is that
No.
So
Location. So I think it sounds like it wouldn't be an awful idea to potentially look at land available, whether it be farmland or land close to where our next 20 years growth is going to be. Not size, not anything. My question is, again, I don't know if the mayor can help me. I think you know what I mean. We were either allocating or bringing, I believe, future residential that's associated to Grant and to Lucan, where we're asking the province to bring some down. And that's supposed to represent 20 years of growth, is my understanding. I think it may not be a bad idea, because that's 20 years of growth, that could be an area that we look at for purchasing a property or talking to somebody, or, you know, the Field of Dreams by an estate, or somebody may want to donate. I don't know. But if that's not too many years out, I think, again, a long-term goal where 20 years of growth is going to be, and getting close to that area is maybe not a bad thing to know. So does that?
Yeah, and I think that'll form part of this process, because they'll look at areas of growth, and this will form part of that study to say, okay, this would be a good area for growth for the soccer fields, for recreation purposes, whether that's out the back of the arena, whether that's by the lagoons, whether that's, you know, on the east side of Saintsbury, whatever, north or south of Tim Hortons. I think that's part and parcel of this process. And I think those comments would be valid at that, going through that process. Okay, but so I think the issue right now is soccer has an expectation, and they're really panicking. What are we going to do next year? So I think if I could maybe fill in for Paul a little bit here, we need to do two things. One is how do we satisfy or make them feel a little better that they're not going to be totally not able to service the number of kids that they expect to join. So that's the first one. And I think Paul is, like I said, he's reached out to the developer up there. There's potential that we may not lose that upper field in 2021. And maybe there's some negotiation there that we can help them if they help us, kind of thing. So I think there's an opportunity there that I don't want to lose sight of. But again, that's just short term. We still need to work on a long-term solution, which is what you're talking about, Deputy Mayor. And I think this official plan process will assist in that.
So a couple things. Well, and by the way, I'm in favor of pursuing that field's not available, and it's simply a bonus if it is, in case they've got to do testing or drilling. I want to proceed that 2021 is not there. I believe Paul's got permission maybe from the school even to use that field. Again, this is all temporary. I don't think they're excited about it. I don't think they feel the field is as desirable compared to what they're using, you know, through our township. But this is just to get us through. But again, my question is right now, where there's farmland, and we are, I believe, staff or a planning department or somebody, we're going to know where 20 years of growth is, and we don't know that yet. Correct?
Correct.
And my question is,
we think we know some areas, but we don't 100%. Correct.
Right. And when are we going to know the areas?
Well, the whole process is scheduled to be done and presented to County Council for approval in December. So between now and then, I guess that's the best I can. That's very quick, I think. You know.
Yes, so December, then we're gonna know where 20 years of growth is gonna be. I just think that could be, you know, with our current population and knowing where 20 years of growth is gonna be, and if we're gonna know that in December, that's what I've been looking for. So December, and then from there, I think sitting down with the budding property owners or looking at those developments or wherever they are, is there land available potentially? Or it's funny, we may revert back to this plan. I still see if this is the smartest decision. I don't want to do this decision here that's not being asked by staff to proceed with. I think in 2 years could be one of the things we do. Don't get me wrong. But I like the idea of you know, I like that answer that we know where 20 years of growth is going to be. That I think we should obviously, that should be key to, and again, we may get shut out from trying to, again, acquire property, get property donated to us. I have no idea. And then obviously it's a large cost to create this, but I think we haven't done a great job in keeping up with our growth on this. And I think, I certainly would be in favor of a large, substantial investment into this, soccer, baseball, anything, and in the future, where these are all going to be plotted. Maybe the diamonds grow in behind the arena, and the soccer fields move somewhere else, and it's I'm not talking 3 acres, is it 10 acres, and I don't know, but that to me is a key part of this. So that's good to know.
Off the top of my head, I'm not going to tell you exactly where we're looking for because I don't want to get into speculation, but there's 4 different areas that we've talked about internally that could potentially be the location for a soccer complex, if you want to call it that.
Okay, any other questions or comments from council on the report from Paul? Councilor Mastarakis.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. One of the comments we get from some of the soccer members was, I hate to bring soccer versus hockey. How many hockey registrations do we have versus soccer registrations? Do you know that number?
I wouldn't know. That would be a question I'd have to ask minor hockey, but it's quite a substantial amount.
Because they mentioned 400 for soccer. Would you know if that's around the same? Is it more or less for the number of registrations?
It's probably around the same, if not more.
Okay.
And it same. All those numbers fluctuate too. It's very difficult because it all depends on the age of the population at the time. So if there's a lot of like young kids right now, in 5 years you might have a huge registration, and then once those kids become teenagers and some lose interest, then you see a huge drop until new families come in. So it's a very fluctuating number that makes it kind of difficult to react to, I guess.
And I know some of the comments were the funds going towards basically maintaining an arena with ice versus soccer fields, and potential inequity between, getting a soccer field and supporting an ice rink at a higher cost. So I wanted to keep that in mind as some of the comments they made in regards to making sure that how we treat this is I know we're Hockeyville, but we're also a sports and recreationville. I've heard comments about so many people walking and moving around the community. We're becoming a very healthy community, and we want to make sure that we're not discriminating against any sports, so to speak, that we're fair to what the numbers are and where the community is driving in that direction. I'm sure that development strategy, when we're adding apartment buildings or will give us some of the demographics of where this is going to and what we're going to do. So just a comment rather than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, soccer is a very affordable sport, so I think it's very important to keep that in mind, that it's a nice option for the community. And I know affordable sports is one of the key action plans of the Parks and Rec Master Plan. So it's very important. And I think that was echoed through the PRAC meeting. I know they're much in favor of supporting soccer because it is important because of the low cost. But, and I also, I definitely try not to compare hockey and soccer and baseball because they're all very different, and it's not fair to any of the sports, I don't think, because it's not a fair comparison. It's just what's important is providing a service for the community and good access to recreation, I think.
Any other comments, questions from council? I guess for my 2 cents, to kind of jump off what Councillor Mastarakis has said about, you know, investment in this particular sport, I would agree with Paul. You can't compare one to another. But I think that council has shown that they've got a great appetite in investing in soccer and providing for them. I mean, I understand, I absolutely understand the frustration that some members of soccer community feel that it's been a slow process and that perhaps we haven't, you know, reacted as we should. But I believe, and I will stand behind it, and I'm happy to have that discussion with anybody, that we have gone through the steps to try to secure land, and for various reasons, yes, the land was not purchased. We have begun discussions on looking at other areas around the community. We have put money away. We've invested in this plan to see how these three soccer fields could be put behind the arena. So I believe that staff and council have shown a commitment to coming up with a solution to soccer, for soccer, excuse me. And I think the key is we really, really have to get this right. And I appreciate getting the letter from soccer today, because I do think, and then hearing that, you know, maybe we'll have a better plan of where community is growing in December. And we're working with that to better plot the soccer fields out. I really think coming out of this today, that staff has to make this a priority to start these discussions in the community as to where there's land. And we have to make it known that we are willing to have those discussions. You know, I don't think it's a secret as to the potential of where Lucan's going to grow. We had a very public meeting here last summer about the circles of growth. So there's no secret how this community can potentially grow. And I really do think we put it out there, you know, maybe we partner with people for some legacy planning, or we are looking for purchasing. And then to Dave's point, you know, maybe in the end, it does come back to what's at the arena. The reality is, you know, the arena is going to be part of it. We've got existing soccer fields there. And whether we build off that, off the back of the arena, to the side of it, to property, or to somewhere else, you know, I think we have to start being aggressive in having those conversations with members of the community to exactly see where our options are. I do believe that, you know, if we can show the Soccer Association that we're committed to that we're doing this, you know, maybe they do have to put up with a year of pain with having to play at Wilberforce. And, you know, maybe we have to look at going to Huron Park and renting space from them on their off times when their soccer is not playing. Who knows what that looks like? But if we show that we're having a commitment to actually coming up with something that will be appropriate for the growth and not just a knee-jerk solution, I think we'll be able to work quite well with the Soccer Association. So with that, I'm assuming that it would be, we'll just accept Paul's report for information. I mean, he does have a recommendation that, I just lost it, that we essentially have those discussions and don't necessarily move forward with that plan today. Ron.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I might make a suggestion that we we sort of expand on the recommendation, that we accept the recommendation of the Parks and Recreation manager in regards to this issue, and further instruct staff to make this project a priority, like you said, and proceed to consult the public and move this issue forward.
Okay. I'm happy with that wording. If council's happy with that one, I would entertain somebody to move that and second it unless there's any further discussion. Deputy Mayor, you gonna move that? Yep. Okay, moved by Deputy Mayor Manders and seconded by Councillor Regan. Better write this down. Okay. And any further discussion on that? All opposed? Oh, sorry. I'm sorry, Councillor Mastarakis.
Yeah, just one question about moving it, timelines. What's an expectation about moving this faster? What is that?
Well, to me, I think we need to have like a serious, and I know Paul's had a discussion with the soccer association, number one. Let's try to get, try to get a clear understanding of what they see their needs are in, in 5, 10, 7 years to come. Is that 3 fields? Is that 7 fields? Is that, how many fields? Let's have that discussion. And I think once council starts talking about property, those discussions kind of go through the community like wildfire. Wouldn't surprise me if perhaps maybe phone call, somebody might pick up the phone to start that discussion. I think staff can go from there. But I think the first thing is to sit down with the soccer association and try to get a clearer picture as to what they kind of see, what their actual needs are. In a certain time frame, as opposed to just next year.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And maybe, I don't know, did I speak for you, Paul?
No, I think very accurate. I know I've been working really well with Jeff on this. We've been really kind of looking to see what my options are, and he's been great help to me, and we go back and forth with Ron, and I think the 3 of us are going to have a few meetings coming up very shortly and kind of what the next direction is so we can really get this moving forward.
Great, thank you. So there is a motion on the floor. If there's any other comments? If not, all opposed? And that's carried. Thank you very much. And I do thank Paul and the Parks and Rec Committee, and everybody involved. There has been a lot of work done to date, and I just don't want to see that momentum lost, and we can start to move forward on that. Did you have anything else, Paul?
Yeah, just a few verbal. So as everyone knows, as of Friday, we are allowed to move into phase 3 of reopening. With that comes the opening of play structures, which is going to be fairly simple for us. So they'll be open early next week. We're just getting signage up, and the biggest one that I need to have a conversation with our ice users is the return to league play. I know the OHF is not allowing them to do registration yet, as they're still unsure of how they're going to operate. I know there's been a lot of conversation internally with them on their insurance and how insurance will be provided. The big thing, though, and even for the adult ball leagues that have been anxious to maybe get a few games in this summer, is that leagues are restricted to a 50 participant league. So that could really affect a lot of hockey, a lot of baseball. They might just not be able to do it because you're stuck to that. That's your 50 group. And so say there's like a team of 10 Lucan kids, they can only play the same 5 teams for the entire season. So I'm curious to see what their response is on that and what their plans are going forward. Collectively through the county, I think we're really on the same page for a lot of these things. We're talking about, as we've said before, at this point, we need to put a lot more into people's hands. So we're putting out surveys to the user groups to see how they can, their plans for operating with COVID-19 restrictions. So we're going to be sending that out shortly, so then we can start getting answers back, because that's the main thing. And even as Mr. Ford said in his announcement, you know, even things that aren't allowed to open, if we can submit plans, or if there's restrictions or limitations to how we can operate, we can submit a plan to public health, and they can look at what we're suggesting and let us know if it could work. So I'm anxious to get going on that, as are many people in the community, I'm sure. And another thing that we need to look at, and this is something I've been circulating with other municipalities, is the craft show. Because usually this time of year we'd be phoning vendors, letting them know if they've been accepted, and they would begin starting to create their crafts. I know some of the comments that have come back is with the demographic and the size of the group, it'd be very difficult to operate a craft show with that 50 limitation. And I think we need to make a decision on that as soon as possible, so we're not, you know, creating panic or just bad feelings with these vendors, as they put their time and money into making these products, and they look forward to it every year. But so we don't want to cause disappointment. So I know Abby and myself have been working hard on that one, and it's kind of looking towards like we may need to cancel it this year, unfortunately.
Just as a point of reference, Paul, how many visitors do we usually get to the craft show?
I'll have to double check with Abby on that one. I know she's really good at keeping track of those numbers. I believe it's over 300, 400 a day, I believe. So it's quite a bit.
Yeah. And just even from a vendor standpoint, you know, the way those booths are spaced together, and I wish you the best of luck making that decision.
Yeah. I mean, 50 vendors, then you have no one in the show. So it's, we usually have quite a few vendors. So, little good news though is that we are getting some sort of guidance on how to put forward these decisions. I know the province has provided some great guidance that I've been going over with, discussing with every other recreation directors in the community, in the county, sorry. And there's great guidance on safely operating parks and recreation and facilities that I'm going over with my staff as well.
That's good. Any questions for Paul on any of that? I'm just wondering, Paul, is the dog park open yet?
It will be opening next week. We've been watering that, as Jeff said earlier. It's not the ideal time of year to grow grass, and we've been trying to get that root system to start, and it's coming around now. So I think the shade sales will be up, and I think they're going to be quite happy when they get back in there. We're looking to do that next week.
Okay, good. That's good to know. Any other questions for Paul? Okay, moving on, Lisa.
So before you, I'm just going to share a screen here. There is my report on a couple of items. The first one being the results of the committee survey. It's attached to your report. Some of the highlights of that, and I think the one didn't drop down when it talked about some membership. Some people had some suggestions. I should note there was 14 submitted out of 19 requested. So typical survey results a little bit. The membership suggestions was, I'm assuming, because sometimes it was Parks and Rec and Bacon Fest and CDC. So some of them were a little more vague on the answers, but some of them were specific. For membership, some of the suggestions were having OPP, some more seniors, some less fortunate groups, and having all sports groups represented. EDC, of course, more businesses. That's kind of what we always gather every time. Some improvement highlights to the committee. Let me see, I go down here. Basically, it was creating mission statements, maybe talking to the downtown businesses, getting what their concerns are, how we can support them. So obviously more outreach, better information flow to the committee members via email, recruiting, and brainstorming with the committees. Some of the suggestions for next steps were, again, talk to local businesses. Maybe there's workshops we can provide our members, bringing in guest speakers, and increasing some seniors programs, looking at the master plan. And some of the likes were that the meetings were set out for a full year so that people could plan accordingly. So I'm not sure if anyone has any questions on the survey results, but it just kind of gives us some ideas of what people are thinking, and something for staff to think about when we're talking to our members, and how we can keep our committees energized and fresh, and with some new membership. So.
Okay, any questions for Lisa on the survey?
So the other item is the proposal for the development of the community improvement plan. The CEDC met back in June, and we had presentations from the county. Council was invited to attend that session as well, and you received copies of basically it was the community improvement plan, like a primer that was developed, as well as Kara's presentation at that meeting. So at the end of the EDC meeting, the committee felt that we should move forward with the development of our own CIP, and we obtained a quote from this company, Republic Urbanism, to do Lucan Biddulph's CIP. The proposals there, I should note that we had in the budget a $10,000 line item anyway established, and the County of Middlesex has agreed to cost share this proposal for 50%. So you can see what council's in my report, what the commitment financially is for us. We're recommending the moving forward with Paul Hicks and his committee, or his business. Like I said, Paul has a good history in the County of Middlesex. He was a former planner at Strathroy Caradoc, and we have good relationships with him. He obviously already developed the county primer and is working with, potentially working with some of the other lower tiers to develop their own CIP. We do realize it would be nice to have more of a similar CIP throughout the lower tiers in the county. So this is kind of definitely another reason why we would recommend approving the proposal from Republic Urbanism. And it kind of goes through some of their experience and some of the things that they've done in the development of the CIP in his proposal. So I'm not sure if anyone has any questions about Paul's submission to us. I'm just going to go back up to my report. Sorry for the scrolling. So again, the cost of the total completion of the plan was $17,469.80, including HST, with our portion being $8,734.90. Yeah, so we're just recommending to move forward with the development of the CIP.
If I just might jump in.
Yep.
Any questions, but I would hope that council's taken the time to look at kind of what's all in making a CIP, and if they had a chance to go back, or I know that Lisa shared Kara and Dirk's presentation to see the CEDC, and I know not every member of council could attend that meeting, but I think it's a great backgrounder on what a CIP is and how important it is to a community. So I think it's no secret. I'm a big proponent of this. I think that I've been saying that we should have one, been having one for a number of years. So obviously about the possibility. But if you've got any questions about the benefits of a CIP and what it means to a community, now's the time to direct them to Lisa.
I should note too, this is a pretty important document and how we, even going forward for grant projects, a lot of them require us to have a CIP. The county's doing even some things right now where they have some funds. And part of that is you had to have a CIP for some of these things. So we've been talking about this for a number of years. So it is really important that we kind of continue this momentum. And unfortunately with COVID, some of this stuff is going to have to be a little bit virtual, some of our consultations, but maybe as we get on into the process, we'll actually be able to do some more face-to-face, in-person kind of discussions versus, online.
I think there's great potential for this. Lisa mentioned about what the county's doing. So the county as a upper tier level of government cannot have a CIP. And so this is how, in them investing, 50% of the funds, this is their way of supporting the communities in Middlesex so that they can have a CIP. And then, as Lisa said, we're going to be directing some funds to some of the CIPs to help with some COVID recovery. And who knows how long that may go. If we get a second wave, we may be through all this again. So that's just some of the discussions that's been had. Okay, any questions for Lisa?
Okay, I think Tina there's probably a motion in our package for that approval. Just one other thing, I'm just obviously Paul mentioned again about the COVID, we're stage 3, which actually I think all of our businesses now can open up if they choose. Some of our businesses actually are kind of doing things a little differently. Some of them are only open on one day and appointments. And so they're all kind of figuring out their new way of operating in this COVID world. But it's good to say that basically, I think everyone can open up finally in Lucan Biddulph, including our gyms and everything. So I think everyone's quite happy, and their free stickers that they've picked up from the office have gone out that they appreciate to help them do everything. So, yep, that's it for me.
That was an exciting announcement yesterday, that's for sure. I think one that everybody's been looking forward to, but I think we have to caution everybody, not everybody might be ready on Friday. And we still have to be respectful as businesses slowly jump back into business. And there's still restrictions on us. We still have to remember that. It's not a free-for-all, So, all right, moving on. Councillors' comments. Before I open it up to everyone, I should have maybe brought this up when Alex was giving his Upper Thames report, but I received an email from our friends at Upper Thames back in June with regards to the project that they are undergoing in Granton. And we went on a field trip last year, council will remember, where we visited them and learned all about their erosion measures that they're put in place and how they're working with local farmers. And they have provided a video as an update for what is going on in Granton, and I thought it would be appropriate for us to share it. So I know Ron was having some issues before, but I think we've got it figured out.
I hope I've got it figured out. So let me just try this here. And of course, now it's gone.
Do you want me to do it?
So I had some problems earlier. Madam Mayor, can you bring it up from yours? Is that possible? Do you know how to share the screen?
If Lisa gives me the ability to, I can.
Okay, if you take your pointer and move it to the bottom where it says share screen, you just click on the green button there. It should pop up, and then you pick which screen. Yep, there you go. Perfect.
For the Upper Medway Cover Heart project is first and foremost a water quality project, but often what's missing in the cover crop story is the economic and the agronomic impacts of cover crops. And that's really what we're trying to answer by having these check strips in place. So not only will we be monitoring differences in soil parameters, but we'll be looking at differences in crop yield.
Cover crops should improve the soil, allow more air and water infiltration in through the soil, which should help the crops, but it also should keep water soaking down into the ground instead of creating overland runoff. Rye has a fibrous root system which should hold soil in place. I mean, I dug this clump of grass up here and you can see it's holding this entire chunk of soil together. So it's definitely got some power in the root system to hold soil in place, and that should benefit by reducing erosion on this field.
We're looking at soil temperature, soil moisture, infiltration, compaction. We're also taking residue measurements and then looking at the cover crop plant population. One of the neat things that has happened this spring is that we've had fields where the cereal rye got on a little bit earlier, and then some that was planted much later, but that much later planted cereal rye has seemed to make up for lost time and has been able to catch up in terms of growth this spring.
We're going to be monitoring the soybean field here, and we're teaming up with Veritas Farm Management to see, is there a statistical difference in yield where there is or wasn't a cover crop. So that'll be very interesting to see, and we'll find out this fall 2020.
Okay, so anyways, I thought that was a good update. As everybody knows, I mean, we've been, Upper Thames has been in our community since, I don't know, like working on this project, maybe since 2011 or 2012. I guess they've been working on this for quite some time. So it's great to get these updates. And, you know, I think they've had a lot more buy-in from a number of our farmers as they're seeing the benefits of these tests. So it's exciting. Does anybody else, any other councillor comments? Dave, Deputy Mayor.
Just, I know, and again, everyone's going to think, I get asked about the car wash a lot. So I know it seems like it's come from me personally, but I don't mind putting my name personally behind these questions. We discussed its, so I guess my question is, I believe Lisa had mentioned, and I believe Ron clarified that after the meeting, and that it was indeed that the, I believe, if I'm phrasing this right, the building permit had, I believe, passed July 1st. So I assume the applicant knows they got to pay for a new building permit, and they were notified of that. And or is that just at staff's discretion, or is that our procedures? And second thing is, you know what? Yeah, so that's a question. Then I assume the applicant or that person would have to come to council for forgiveness if they wanted to. But again, I assume notice would have been given, because if that's our policy, I assume we follow it. So if Ron wants to comment on that.
So through you, Madam Mayor, I haven't touched base with Arnie Marsman lately. I know there was a notice that went from Arnie to the applicant saying, look, you got to do something here or we're going to pull your permit. And I know there's conversation going back and forth. That was confirmed apparently by Dane Vandermolen, his contractor. So I will double check with Arnie and see what the status is. I
just have notice would have been given. If is that our policy, or is that, or no? Is it just up to you guys to decide?
I don't even know the answer to that, because we typically don't run into that. When people or apply for a permit and get a permit, they typically build. So I don't know that we've really run into this situation before. So I will find out from Arnie.
Okay, yeah. So I assume we'd follow it. And that leads into the second question, which actually was a comment. And I don't know, I just haven't been by there yesterday or today, was that one of the disappointments of Bacon Fest was that seemed to be the time we cared about that property once a year in Lucan. We had them whippersnip it, which is disappointing that it was Bacon Fest that created that. And I agree with that comment. That seems to be when that was the once a year we seem to care about the cleanliness and these vacant lots. So they were just wondering, when Bacon Fest canceled, could we still care about the lot? So. And that's, you know, that's on us as council, by the way. You know, I'm not blaming staff on that. And I kind of, you know, the comment kind of took me back, to be honest. I thought, shame on us. You know, this is getting ridiculous. So.
Just to clarify, it was cut.
It might have been.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it was cut
That's what I
once,
mean.
But yes.
I just don't know if that would have triggered the call. I don't know. It has triggered the call year after year, only Bacon Fest. With Bacon Fest canceled, that was one of the disappointments. So that it wouldn't be cleaned. So, yeah.
So we'll get an answer from Arnie sooner rather than later, I think, on that.
Okay.
Any other councillor comments? Nothing? Okay, all right, moving on. Changes to budget, nothing. Any notices of motion? Okay, so then we will move into our motions. Resolved that the Council of the Township of Lucan Biddulph authorize Catherine Landendijk to attend the MFOA virtual conference on September 22nd to 25th, 2020 at a registration cost of $400 plus HST. Can I get a mover and seconder for that, please? Councillor Mastarakis and Councillor Westman. All in favor? Or, yeah, and that's carried. Resolved that the Council of the Township of Lucan Biddulph authorize Peter Mastarakis to attend the AMO virtual conference on August 17th to 19th, 2020 at a registration cost of $600 plus HST. A mover and seconder for that, please. Councillor Reagan and the Deputy Mayor, Dave.
Kathy, sorry to interrupt. Just, I don't think I printed the accounts paid motion, so I don't want you to miss that.
Oh, okay.
It's a possibility, so. Okay.
I'll pull that to that. Just make a note. Great. All opposed to sending Peter to AMO? And that's carried. Okay, so I will just do the accounts paid one so that I don't forget. Resolved that the Council of the Township of Lucan Biddulph received the attached accounts as paid for information as follows. For May 2020, $1,559,408.63. A mover and seconder for that, please. Daniel, Councillor Reagan, and Councillor Westman. All opposed? And that's carried. Resolved that the Council of the Township of Lucan Biddulph authorize Catherine Landendijk and Rhonda Frieder to enroll in Unit 2 of the Municipal Accounting and Finance Program offered through AMCTO for the fall 2020 term at a registration cost of $446.35, including HST per person. Can I get a mover and seconder for that, please? Councillor Mastarakis and Councillor Reagan. All opposed? And that's carried. Resolved that the Council of the Township of Lucan Biddulph authorize Tina Murner to enroll in Unit 3 of the Municipal Administration Program offered through AMCTO for the fall 2020 term at a registration cost of $446.35, including HST. A mover and seconder, please. Alex and Dave. All opposed? And that's carried. The council approved to withdraw $20,247.87 from the Efficiency Fund reserves in 2019 for the 2019 projects as presented in report number FIN-10-2020. A mover and seconder for that, please. Daniel, Councillor Reagan, and Councillor Mastarakis. All opposed? And that's carried. Resolved that the Council of the Township of Lucan Biddulph authorizes staff to accept the tender for the Casey McCarthy drain from AG Hayter Contracting Limited in the amount of $165,274.93, including HST, and award the same upon final reading of the bylaw. A mover and seconder for that, please. Councillor Mastarakis and Councillor Westman. All opposed? And that's carried. Resolved that the Township of Lucan Biddulph authorize staff to accept the tender for the Riddle McCarthy drain from AG Hayter Contracting Limited in the amount of $264,800.81, including HST, and award the same upon final reading of the bylaw. A mover and seconder for that, please. Councillor Regan and Councillor Westman. All opposed, and that's carried. Resolved that the Township of Lucan Biddulph authorizes staff to accept the tender for the Hodgins drain from R&S Graham Contracting Limited in the amount of $78,267.19, including HST, and award the same upon final reading of the bylaw. A mover and seconder for this one, please. Councillor Regan, and seconded by the Deputy Mayor Manders. All opposed, and that is carried. That the Council of the Township of Lucan Biddulph approve the proposal from Public Urbanization for the development of a Lucan Biddulph Community Improvement Plan. A mover and seconder for this one, please. Councillor Mastarakis and Deputy Mayor Manders. All opposed. And that's carried. And resolved that if no one cares to speak to these bylaws on their first, second, and third reading, that they be considered to have been read a first time and passed, read a second time and passed, read a third time and passed, and that they be numbered 30-2020, the procedural bylaw, 31-2020, 31-2020, the fees bylaw, 32-2020, the confirming bylaw. A mover and seconder for this one, please. Councillor Westman and Councillor Regan. All opposed, and that's carried.
Sorry, Kathy, one more thing.
What's that?
Did we do a motion for the efficiency funds for Catherine's report? We did? Okay, it was just earlier. Okay, thanks.
So at County Council, we do we read out all of the accounts paid, like per department, and we read out every communication item that's received between council meetings. So today, I had 34 of them to read, and then I just had this pile to read.
Sorry.
Okay. Anyways, resolved that the council meeting be adjourned at 9:16 p.m. A mover and seconder for this one. Councillor Regan and Councillor Westman. And all opposed to this. And that is carried. Thank you very much.